All right, welcome back to the War Room. I'm here with the man of all the spicy motorsports takes, Karsten Nichols. Buddy, how you doing?
Howdy, boys. I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, dude. Just coming off of New Year's and Christmas, ready to get back at the podcasting stuff. And dude, I don't know about you. I've been waiting for this episode ever since like the back half of August or September or whenever we last got to watch dirt bikes, run around in poorly draw circles and figure eights and stuff like that. Because we are less than a week away from Anaheim 1, the first race of the 2024 Supercross season. And I don't know if there's another way to say it. This looks like the most stacked field in Supercross history. I don't know about you. What do you think?
Oh, dude, it looks incredible. A little spoiler for later, we kind of put together some of our predictions for the season, and I couldn't even place like a number one. Like there's some obvious things you could go with, but dude, it's gonna be insane. I mean, there's guys that you would think are like top 5 guys, and it's like, is he even gonna be in the top 10 this year? Like, I don't know. It's incredible. It's gonna be a good season.
The best way to describe it is you're going into a season where your main events consist of 20 riders, right? And amongst the field, not even including privateers, we have 7 450 champions. We have 3 world champions from either MXGP or World Supercross or other kind of world events. We have 10 450 race winners, and we should have 11 if it weren't for Aaron Plessinger taking a nosedive with half a lap to go in Detroit last season, which was tragic. It feels like the sport owes him that win back because it just came out of nowhere. And then we have 17 450 riders who have won a 250 championship. So they've been a champion of the lights class before we move up to 450s. We have 18 factory riders in total. That's not counting Dean Wilson and both of the Hill brothers. So basically it means that, like, before any injuries, of course, because Supercross is a brutal sport, it means that Dean Wilson and the Hill brothers, if you just think of the fact that every factory rider should qualify in their heat race in the top 9 and not have to race the last chance qualifier, that means Dean Wilson and both the Hill brothers are going to be in every LCQ. Like, that's a crazy thought.
Yeah, which is wild because they were doing so good at the end of motocross. So, I mean,
Justin Hill got a podium.
Yeah. So, like, maybe it's not them. Maybe it's someone else.
Yeah, I mean, look,
right?
This is the class that has Eli Tomac, Chase Sexton, Cooper Webb, Ken Roczen, Jet Lawrence, Jason Anderson, Justin Barcia, Malcolm Stewart, Aaron Plessinger, Adam Cianciarulo, Christian Craig, Dylan Freitas, Hunter Lawrence, Justin Cooper, and somebody of what I just mentioned has to finish 14th. Like, those are all huge names in the sport. And we get the luxury of having them all in one season, at least for one race, right? And obviously, we're only talking about 450s
at least for one race, yeah.
At least for one race. If you're a Malcolm Stewart fan like me, you got to watch your favorite rider for 2 races last year, and you were heartbroken in both of them. And then the pain just got worse 2 weeks later when you found out he tore every ligament in his knee. I'll talk about that later. But the sport can be brutal. So we're only guaranteed all of these guys for one race. But when you think about if there's any possibility we get half of these guys, 70% of these guys for a whole season, and they all get to stick around to have an impact on the championship, man, we're in for one, dude.
Oh, it's going to be a battle. I'm so excited.
This is, in my opinion, the most stacked class we've had since 2006. I would say it's, in regards to the overall field, I'd say it's more stacked than that. And I don't think there's a solid argument for it. You can debate all you want. I mean, I'm not going to say that the potential 3-way battle between Eli Tomac, Chase Sexton, and Jet Lawrence that everyone's talking about right now is at the same Mount Rushmore level in regards to individual riders as Chad Reed, Ricky Carmichael, and James Stewart in 2006. But dadgum, it's close. And we're not going to know really how close it is until all 3 of those guys' careers are done. Then we'll be able to look back at the season and say, how did it stack up to 2006?
Yeah, and with those 3 guys, I mean, that's not even including Cooper Webb and Ken Roczen getting involved. So it's like, I mean, I don't think we're going to have a 5-way battle necessarily, but
yeah, I mean you have a 2-time champion in Cooper Webb as recent as 2020 and 2018, I believe, or no, it was 2021 and 2019. I forget. Jason Anderson, he's a champion. He won with Husqvarna, and he challenged Eli Tomac in 2022. Justin Barcia, I mean, the dude is just a rolling rocket ship and just propels people off bikes and is occasionally really fast. Christian Craig, 250 championship a year and a half ago. Dylan Ferrandis, he's a 450 outdoor champion. Hunter Lawrence, he looks just as promising as Jet in some aspects, especially 2 years ago as a 250 Supercross outdoor rider. But yet the older brother is taking a slight backseat to Jet Lawrence because Jet Lawrence is coming off of a 22-0 motocross season and a 250 Supercross championship, and going back to back as well, year to year. I mean, there's infinite storylines to get into, and I just can't wait to dive into it. So, I'm gonna have Karsten kind of run point on the ship on this one because there's just so much to cover, and we've got to digest it here. So, Karsten, who are we starting with first here?
Let's look at these Lawrence brothers and see what's going on with them, because I mean I know obviously there's a lot of talk around Eli Tomac and what he's gonna be able to do this season, but obviously Jet's got so much hype around him, and Hunter is kind of, I wouldn't say it's, totally up in the air. Obviously, he's really good, but he could land anywhere in this pack. I could see him being within the top 3 and being like, okay, that makes sense. I could see it. And him being like number 8 and being like, yeah, well, first season, I could see it. Makes sense. So, yeah, what do you think about these guys and what they're going to do?
So basically, for those that don't know, Team Lawrence Brothers is the equivalent of saying Team Honda now. With the by the way, I will say we are only covering 450s today because there's just no time. Like we don't have time to get into the lights class of 250s yet. We will in future episodes, but for an Anaheim 1 and 2024 preview, we will be here all day. So in regards to Honda, like I said, you can call Honda Team Lawrence now because they used to have, in the 250 classes last year, you had both Lawrence brothers, Hunter and Jet, both won 250 Supercross titles. Jet then moved up to 450 Supercross last year in the 450 motocross for Jet moving up in the summer. In the 450 Supercross category, you had Chase Sexton and Colt Nichols. Chase won the championship last year after a Tomac injury. Colt Nichols was a 1-year contract for Supercross only, kind of a placeholder for Jet until they got there. And then, it was the worst kept secret, but then Chase Sexton was going to leave Honda at the end of the year. And we're going to talk about that later. Now we have, because of Sexton's departure, the 450 class is the Lawrence brothers. You have Jet, who's a guy who got moved up to the 450 motocross class this summer. I was thinking, maybe he'll win a race or two because he was so good in 250s. He looks like a generational talent, kind of like a James Stewart. In regards to just the hype, wow, this is a crazy once in a generation athlete. Like, this is crazy. He went 22-0, beating Chase Sexton completely to a pulp. And obviously Chase Sexton had bike struggles. We'll talk about that as well. He went 22-0, took 1 L to Chase Sexton in the opening round of the first Super Motocross playoff, and then proceeded to not lose to Chase the rest of the time. So he won 2 of the 3 championships in this series. The only one he didn't win was the 450 Supercross championship because he was simply in the 250 championship, and now he's going into his rookie season, but also so is Hunter. So Hunter's just, he's starting his whole 450 career with 450 Supercross. Jet has this weird expectation of, he's not just being talked about as a favorite to win the championship because of his talent, because of the fact he went 22-0 in motocross with a lot of key players. And there was a lot of injuries from the 450 Supercross season, and even some that took place in the 450 motocross season, like Cooper Webb. He's being talked about as the favorite. Like I said, he went 22-0, and then he won the Super Motocross playoff with a lot of key players in there, beat a lot of big names. And yes, Tomac was sitting on the sidelines, but multiple media outlets, everyone and their brother is talking about him like it's almost the expectation for him to come into the hardest championship of the 3 between Supercross, Motocross, and Super Motocross, the playoff, and win the whole thing in his rookie season. So there's not much to talk about in a technical aspect with these guys because the Honda CRX 450 is not changing this year. They're not switching to a new chassis or anything. I think they're required every 2 or 3 years to make a new bike. So there shouldn't be any major technical changes to my knowledge. The only thing to take of note is we do know, especially on the Supercross track in particular, not one but two riders from last year, both riders from last year's 450 Supercross team struggled with front end balance, particularly Chase Sexton. But Colt Nichols is on record and regarded as a very, very good tester of the bike as well and developer of a bike. He said it took him literally the whole 450 Supercross season to get that bike to where he was comfortable and not constantly scared of the front end washing out on him. And Chase Sexton struggled with the front end washing out on him and overloading the whole season. For some reason, Jet made that bike at the 450 level look easy.
Yeah, it didn't seem like he had any problems like that at all in motocross. And maybe it's with the way that they ride the bike because they're kind of similar but not completely. And I don't know.
I don't know either. All I know is like that's not just something that the pro riders that have ridden the CRX 450 from Honda have noted. Like people who have bought the production bikes, like just a regular off the block CRX 450, have said this thing is a little bit loose on the front end in regards to it likes to overload when you least expect it, and when you overload the front suspension of a bike, it'll just toss you off. And honestly, that is from what the industry is talking about nowadays. The Japanese bikes, as compared to the Austrians, are for some reason moving in that direction. Not maybe as a side effect, they're not trying to, but they're just becoming a lot more front end twitchy, and they seem to toss riders off more and more, and they have no idea where to point from where it came from. So that's the only thing from a technical standpoint I'd say in regards to Honda. Like this could be an outlier. But I think there's no question Jet is definitely going to be in the title hunt. It's almost expected, which is so weird for a 450 rookie. We haven't seen that since James Stewart, and we can talk about more about the comparison between now and 2006 in regards to the title picture later. But it's just a wild thought. And then Hunter Lawrence, 450 debut. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but I think he's one of the biggest wild cards. He could be a guy that he gets a top 5 and you're like, well, I could have seen it coming. Look how he did at Paris Supercross. Both of these guys look great at the Paris Supercross exhibition race. Or he could be a guy that has like kind of a Christian Craig year where he's trying to figure things out last year and he just is an 8 to 12 guy. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I think he could go anywhere. I don't know. I could really see him being someone that comes in, and it seems like he's not quite as aggressive on the bike as Jet is. And I feel like with a 450, you don't have to be as aggressive as you do with a 250. And so that could favor Hunter and lead to less mistakes because the Supercross track is so technical, and you have to, and they are both very technical riders for sure. And so that could definitely favor Hunter in that situation.
Well, it's also interesting to note that they both train together still, which is wild to think of. Like, I don't know if that's toxic for them and if or if that helps them, but I think it's safe to say that we're going to have to watch how the two interact with each other over the course of a full season, because they are teammates, but we know how teammates in Supercross really work. Like we've seen plenty of people on the same team absolutely nosedive each other and just stick a wheel in front of them when they come out of a 180-degree bowl turn and just launch them into the sun, like Justin Barcia style or Vince Friese style. And they have the same colors, same bike.
Yeah.
They're teammates, but this is really more of an individual sport. The teams just happen to just want the same guys to do good, and it just means that the team's going to have some consequences for them if they do it too often. So,
right.
I don't know. I mean, do you think that you could have a potential sense of bitterness with them, spending every day training together, and then they're competing directly together if they have a collision? Like,
I don't
good
think
or bad
so.
for them?
No. I don't know if it's good or bad for them, but it seems like their relationship is one where that doesn't get between them or bother them. Although they haven't raced against each other on a stage like this yet. The closest they've gotten was 250 motocross, and they definitely had some battles. They had some awesome battles last year. That was incredible to watch. So, but it seems like they keep it cordial. They're very good riders. They know how to have battles in a safe way. And so I think they'll be fine.
Yeah. I think they'll both do great for their prospective expectations, with the exception of like what really is Jet's expectation. Is it come in and be a guy that's in the title hunt, or is it to win this thing? And
Yeah.
I think people are still trying to figure that out. But the media across the board is saying he's treated as the favorite, which is so wild, dude.
Yeah, well, and that could be a huge confidence builder for Hunter if Jet is the favorite right now, and they're out there on the practice track, and Hunter's, keeping up with him or beating him potentially. They're
I mean,
and they're
he was
competitive
in front of him
with
for
each
a
other.
while at Paris Supercross, dude.
Yeah,
Like, dadgum. I mean, and Jet had to put a move down on him in the whoops and basically knock him over to get past him. So it's pretty interesting, dude.
yeah, we'll see. Well, I mean, obviously we got these guys coming in, and it's kind of interesting that Honda's pretty much got a full team of rookies in the 450 class, but Yamaha has got basically the opposite situation. They've got some champions coming in here that are not about to let these rookies take this thing from them.
Mm-mm.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, the starter you got to look at is Tomac, right? I don't want to say a wild card, but I think he's a guaranteed like top 5 in the standings guy.
Yeah,
He's going to be a guy that has this really nice balance of being able to give rapid bursts of speed in the short term, and break away from people, but also still have that endurance. But he's also going to be a guy that when things get sketchy, he's going to have that vet rider mentality, that VRM,
mhm,
as certain people call it, and be
yeah,
able to know, hey, let me think big picture here for just 1 second, and maybe not nose diving in the whoops when the lines are sketchy and we're skimming over bare wood because the track's so broken down. Like, think of what he did in Tampa. Like, imagine like he had these weird random races last season where he just kind of like just coasted, but him just coasting was still a 5th place. It leaves everyone after the race going, what the heck is Tomac doing? Is there something wrong? But him having a bad night is 5th place. Other
yeah,
people having bad nights, like think of 2006 James Stewart, when he had all the talent in the world and was expected to win the whole thing because he was such a generational athlete coming in and was so dominant in the lights class. His bad night compared to Carmichael's is eating it in the whoops, and his bike's almost in half because he was going so fast and pushing so hard. So, we saw last year with Tomac, he still has beast mode. He's still got that 2022 and even sometimes that 2015 just unworldly beast mode speed that's signature to Tomac that can allow him to just break away. If he gets a start, just watch out. Like if he pulls a
yeah,
whole shot, he's expected to win, right? But he can combine that with the vet rider mentality, which is a sign of him aging, but also a sign of his maturity. So I would look for him to, if he does win it, it's him combining using beast mode when he can / has to, maybe even only when he has to, and then going into that vet rider mentality to where a bad night for him is a 3rd, and other people's bad nights like a Chase Sexton or a Jet Lawrence or even a Ken Roxon is like an 8th. And that, when you build that over the course of a 17-round season, that can win him the championship that way. That's what he did last year, and it would have worked if it weren't for just a random double that blew his Achilles on an off night. Now, when we look at Cooper Webb, it's kind of a different story. You're looking at a guy that, I mean, dadgum, if he doesn't get a concussion at Nashville, and
he's
this
winning.
everything else played out, he wins.
Yeah,
He could have pointed out Chase Sexton with 2 rounds to go. So that was weird. And honestly, I mean, I know it's just judging off a heat race, but he was still in it with Tomac in the points regardless. He just had to take it to him at Nashville and win out, basically, right? And for the maybe I don't even think it was a full lap of that heat race where he passed Eli Tomac in that bowl turn. I saw an unreal level of speed from him, just like before. I mean, he only took one more turn before he came over and then got run over on his head or whatever by Cianciarulo, I believe. But I just had this thought of, wow, this is a different Cooper Webb than what we saw the last 5 weeks. He is going balls to the wall. He's got a different gear to tap into. And I was wondering if in the SMX playoff we were going to see that when he came back, after he left KTM from a rough motocross season that he stopped midway through, and then went to Yamaha. We're like, oh, well, he's been complaining about the bike for so long. We know he and Red Bull KTM have kind of had a toxic relationship for the last year and a half. and maybe Yamaha was the answer. And obviously, it's 3 races with hybrid tracks, completely new kinds of ways of setting up bikes. I don't know how much we can really read into predicting for Supercross from the SMX playoff series, but obviously he didn't start the way he wanted to or expected to. We kind of saw a more degenerated, I don't know if that's the right word, like kind of like unelectrified version of him after those first 2 rounds where he had an 8th and a 7th and was getting beat by privateers. And then he was able to cap it off with a 3rd in the last playoff when it got closer to a Supercross setup. And I know part of the reason for that is when he was off and he did get to start practicing with Yamaha while everyone else was doing motocross, he was training only Supercross. So he goes into SMX and finds out, oh, it really is more like motocross. I haven't been trading on motocross suspension. This is a whole different ballpark. So he still looked shaky at Paris Supercross, and we can't even look more into that because it is Supercross, but it's an exhibition race. No one's going to be pushing that hard. I don't think we can read too much into that. And we also know that Cooper Webb is the signature guy for looking like crap on the test track, being a guy that for 2 of his his 2 championships was predicted. Oh, he's not even going to finish inside the top 3 because he just looks bad. Like no other way to put it, just looks slow. But then it's the most American thing ever because he's in 1 gear when he's just by himself on the test track. But then you say, I'm going to put 19 other guys next to you at a gate, and I'm going to say that they can be better than you at this. All of a sudden, he turns into the Michael Jordan randomly, right? He just finds not 1 more gear, 3 more gears. Yeah. So he's another one of those guys that is a giant wild card. And you also can't forget about Justin Cooper. I don't think he's not going to be a title contender at all, but he's going to be a guy that could be anywhere from an 8 to 12 guy. He could be a 5 to 10 guy. He had some limited runs in 450 last season, and he's a good talent. I think his prime is 3 years down the road from now, though. I don't think it's his time yet. But in regards to the 3 we just talked about, who do you think is going to be the overall best finisher from these 3 between Tomac, Cooper, and I know we just have to include him for the sake of things, and Justin Cooper? Who do you think is going to be the best overall finisher between those 3 from this team?
I think it's going to be Tomac. Obviously, coming off of last season, he was doing amazing besides the Achilles situation. He's the most used to the bike at this point out of the 3 of them. But I don't think that Cooper Webb's going to do poorly. I think he's going to be up, I'm not going to give anything away, but he's going to do fine. Okay. I think he's going to do fine. I think Justin Cooper will be the most surprising though. I think that there's going to be a couple races where he's going to kind of have his night and come out and get some top 5 finishes and sort of be a like a bit of a spoiler, where you've got a guy that needs to get, just a couple more points, and here comes Justin Cooper, barreling on through, and he's able to take some of those points away. So,
and the weird thing was that's kind of what we saw from him in his limited runnings. I think he raced like 5 races in 450s last year.
Yeah, and he wasn't bad. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think he had a 5th place finish. I think he got a top 5.
Yeah, I think
and
you're right about
that. With Cooper, the last thing I'll say about him is this: I think we do have to take. We don't need to take out the last 6 years he's had with KTM because obviously he didn't. When people say, "Oh, he was with Star before, he wasn't great then." Well, no, he wasn't with Star. He was with just regular Yamaha before they became Star Racing Yamaha. Which, for those that don't know, yes, it's still they're racing Yamahas, but Yamaha based. It's kind of like how Husqvarna is making the most motorcycles, but Rockstar is the title sponsor, and they're kind of helping run the whole program. It's the same thing with Star Yamaha. Like, it was the night and day difference between the OEM Yamaha team versus when they became Star Racing Yamaha and Star Racing kind of started running the show. So we can't look at, in my opinion, we can't look at any stats from when Cooper was with Yamaha previously when he was in 250s.
Well,
and I also think we can't look
450.
Yeah, that in the obvious, right?
Yeah.
But also just the fact that Yamaha team was way different.
Yeah.
Just as a structure and was who was running it, how they were technically making programs. The whole thing was different. The key stat to look at is 2021 Cooper Webb was great, right? And also he's won 2 championships with that KTM team. And he wins by being gritty. He wins by having a bike that's just good enough to for him to get the absolute most out of it and let his competitiveness take over, and for him to continue to chip away at guys over the course of a whole season, get in their heads by being just such a stick in the mud, right? Just that ultimate competitor, right? Like the definition of like the Michael Jordan meme of I took that personally. And people are like, what did you take personally? Like, I don't know. I'm going to find something to take something personally. Like this, just the most crazy competitor ever. Like talking crap to Eli Tomac on the start block right next to him. That's been logged many times. He's even on record saying that. He's also on record saying it didn't work. That's a different conversation. But the key thing is in 2022, where we saw this massive drop off from Cooper Webb in that season, and I think he finished 5th overall. He didn't start out great at all, was not in the title picture at all, got beat by Malcolm Stewart in the overall standings, like, which was, we didn't see that coming at all. Basically that season in 2022, KTM introduced a completely new bike with a completely new chassis design. And since implementing that, he's only had 2 wins over the course of 2 full seasons in Supercross. He's had 2 wins. And you can even count, throw in motocross, throw in the freaking SMX playoff. Obviously, that doesn't really matter. He was with Yamaha at the time. 2 wins over the course of 2 years for a 2-time champion. That's just crazy. It's crazy that the championship with him last year came down to basically with 2 to 3 races to go. And before he got hurt, he was mathematically in it. The only one left challenging Tomac without any kind of variabilities needed for him to get back in the picture, because that's where Sexton was. And he won 1 race that season.
Crazy.
Maybe. Oh, I'm sorry. No, he won 2 races that season too, because he won Dallas and he won Tampa.
He's just always there. Yeah.
So you have to take into account, look at what he did when he had this chassis that he complained about for 2 straight seasons, was begging KTM to give them forks that I don't think were factory forks, because he was that desperate to just switch to something. Or it may not have been a different outside of factory forks, just a different design that KTM hadn't used in forever. He was so desperate to just change something about that bike because he was struggling the whoops, he was struggling overall, and he still got 2 wins. But more importantly, he was still competing in one of the best championship title fights there is. So I think it could take him a while to get going, with him going from a steel frame to a Yamaha aluminum frame, Japanese aluminum frame, and just a whole different setup in general. But I think now he's going to have a little more fluidness and transparentness with him and his team, because there's not that built up bitterness from the last 2 years between KTM and Cooper that he's dealing with anymore. I think they're going to be a little bit more flexible, and we've seen Yamaha be a little bit more flexible with their top guys setup. And I think Cooper kind of needs that behind his back.
Yeah. It's so interesting how different the Yamaha team is than the Honda team, but I don't know. I think that we've got a great, we're in for a great battle between these 2 teams for sure. Now, let's go on and talk about where Cooper came from. Okay, which is KTM. Let's take a look at them first here.
Okay. This is, I think as a team, there's only one other, I guess, group, because you can't talk about KTM without talking about Husqvarna as well, in my opinion, because it's basically the same bike. That's just the whole team is a wild card, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously with KTM, you've got AP and you got Sexton. Do you have any kind of initial thoughts on, who do you expect? Is there any kind of crazy things you've heard about them so far, or?
No, I hope it's AP season.
Everyone does.
I would like for him to have a breakthrough here and at least be top 5. Maybe. I mean, I don't have him high on my list, but as a little bit of hope, some hope and dreams, I would love to see him on the top of the box at least once. That would be incredible.
Well, I think the best take I've heard on where Aaron Plessinger's position and outlook is after coming off of last season is it feels like the sport owes him a win, because when you go back and watch that Detroit crash with half a lap to go, when Chase Sexton is only 4 seconds behind you with a couple laps to go, and he gave you everything he's got, the fastest dude of the whole series last Supercross season, not most consistent, but without a doubt the fastest, dusted Tomac a couple times, and he didn't have anything for you, and you held that, and you just had a couple of turns to go, and you're a half inch of a foot peg being dragged over a little small baby tabletop away from just coasting home.
And he's out
And
just like that.
it just looked like the bike just sunk just a half inch deeper into that rut going over
Yeah.
that little, not even a tabletop, but kind of a tabletop. And it looked like it looked like he thought he had it. I mean, obviously he thought he had it done. Like he had done the hard part.
Yeah.
It felt like just he was robbed. And like
Yeah.
it's not like he lost focus. He did everything right. That's just Supercross sometimes. And man, can this sport be cruel? But I think the main thing with AP is it feels like he was robbed. But I obviously the new face with KTM is Chase
Chase
Sexton.
Sexton. Yeah.
So
Yeah, what do you think? What do you think about this new setup he's trying to figure out here? How do you think he's going to do? Because he was
well,
obviously having trouble with the Honda. Not so much trouble he couldn't, pull out some wins last year, but
and win the whole
yeah,
thing.
and
In
he
regards
is
to
the
Supercross.
champion. He
Yeah.
has the number one plate, so we cannot glaze over that.
Well, in regards to his outlook, there's a couple of things you have to preface it with, which is one, it's so crazy how this sport transitions so quickly, right? We finished the last round of Supercross and we have 2 weeks till motocross, the first race, right? Going outdoors. So when you win Supercross, which is still regarded as the hardest and most coveted championship of now, it used to be two, now 3 different championships you can win with the Super Motocross Playoff Championship being added at the end. You win that, and then you have maybe a day or 2 days to like drink some champagne,
Party.
have someone feed you grapes off the top of a throne,
Yeah.
maybe take a little puddle jump over to Cancun, celebrate. And then most of the guys you're about to compete against in 2 weeks have been testing and practicing for motocross with 2 rounds of Supercross to go.
And they weren't
And you have to
celebrating.
immediately go into it, right? And
Yeah.
the recency
No,
bias.
they were out there lifting pissed off because you won.
Exactly. A lot of them, once they know that they're mathematically out of the championship, they'll stop practicing Supercross and just, rely on practice at the races. And they'll put their practice bike on an outdoor setup with the whole different suspension and everything. And they'll just, it's a whole different thing. So we see the guy win the most coveted of the 3 championships and then have a terrible, not even terrible, just unable to beat one guy in motocross. And once again, unable to only beat one guy in super motocross, and still took it down to the wire. And before he crashed in the last race of super motocross, the final of the 2 races in the last round, gave it all he had. Jet Lawrence, who was right behind him and ended up beating him before he crashed, gave him everything that he had. And before Chase crashed, didn't have anything for him. After the race, said, I didn't have anything for Chase until he crashed. Like that was his to win. The whole motocross had the speed to catch him, just couldn't pass him without tipping over the front end. And because of that motocross season, it's like it would have been better had he just had like an injury at the first race and then just sat out the rest of the year. He would not have the stigma of he got like owned in the motocross season by Jet Lawrence, and like, oh, he just continues to crash and crash and crash. He already had a lot of that from the Supercross season, but it just completely took off, right? So, the crazy thing is a lot of people still think that he left Honda out of the fact of he kept crashing on it and unable to beat Jet on it, when he pretty much, it's pretty much known he signed that contract in October this time last year before Jet even got to the 450s and was still in 250s. And it was still up in the air if he was going to be moved up within a year, right? So he did not make that move to sign with KTM and leave Honda before even having half of the troubles that he had, or even, the amount of troubles he had with the front of that bike, the amount of crashes he had. Riders have left teams for half as much as what he went through in difficulties with a bike in particular, right? Look at what Dylan Ferrandis put up with Honda, all the stuff he's on record complaining about with Yamaha over the course of a season where he was irrelevant until we got to motocross, and he was still getting gapped by 35 seconds by Chase and Jet. So I say all that to say this: recency bias is freaking strong in this sport. So don't forget the overwhelming amount of speed this dude had. Number 2, I think him moving to KTM it's almost like he predicted his own partial downfall in the back half of the season, because the best thing he could have had right now is to just get out of that environment where you're constantly in the same area and tent and everything as the guy who's your biggest rival. And you're constantly having to work with a bike that continues to just dump you on the ground and leave you with no clue as to why it happened. So finally getting into the more technical stuff of this, this is the funny thing. There's two things. One, the reports is Sexton looks a little more stable on the Red Bull KTM from his practice riding, but he does not have the whole thing figured out yet. He's still struggling just a little bit in the whoops. It's not that he's slow. He's still fast. Like, it's probably still better than, 95% or 90% of the field at this point, but it's not as fast as he was, obviously, like getting tossed off on the Honda. Now, granted, that is on the 2023, 2024 chassis. The thing to keep in mind is for KTM, Husky, and Gas, since they all share the same frame, being Austrian brands, and sharing that with each other, they all have the option to either run the current chassis from last year and the year before that, or they can take the 2025 chassis a year early, which is rumored to be a lot better in the whoops, which is the main thing. Like, when you look at what happened with Cooper in 2022, all the KTM riders, all the Husky, I'll just say this: Malcolm Stewart struggled in the whoops. He was having to jump through whoops and not skim them. That should tell you enough, right?
Christian Craig's crash was in the whoops, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, yes,
and
it
Christian
was
Craig
in practice.
Yeah, and he's fast
in the whoops. Yes, absolutely.
Generally,
like he's also supposed to be like, a whoops god, just like anyone with the last name Stewart is supposed to be a god in the whoops, right? So. And Malcolm was struggling to get through the whoops and just be able to skim them, not let alone be able to be fast on them and be in that top 1% he's supposed to be. So we know that's the main problem with the KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas bikes. So he is in the process of, over the last, I say, month of testing that new chassis. The rumor is he is for sure going to take that new chassis. So if he's already kind of feeling more planted, which he's on record saying that, number one, he knew he was overloading the bike specifically in the foot pegs under braking, which is, if you look at where a lot of his crashes were, especially on motocross, it's under braking going into a turn. He's still having weight on the foot pegs because he's a guy who loves to stand up on the bike way more than anyone else, which is similar to Jet. They actually have very similar riding styles. If you look at them, Chase just puts that extra more 5% weight on the front wheel compared to others. And while while Jet is unloading the bike and sitting down a little bit quicker into some of these turns where there's high braking and braking bumps and stuff like that, and it puts the most stress on the bike in regards to just torque in that area, Chase was loading extra weight into the foot pegs on that bike. So it's one, good to hear that he was aware, because that's on record from his own statements from his practice sessions when they had media days and people interviewing him, that he's aware of what one of his riding style problems was, but he's also saying that the KTM actually helps him compensate for this, and he's able to put a little bit more weight in the foot pegs when he's doing this. And it's not, he doesn't have that same feeling. It feels like he can put a little bit more weight into the foot pegs better than he could the Honda. So that's what I have right now in regards to that. I still think he's a guy that, even when he's struggling, is going to be top 5 every race without a crash, which for Chase, that is an outlier. If he crashes, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know when he can crash. But he's still a guy that has top 2, probably not 2, even with Jet, like, in the field. It just depends on that. He could be first or tied for first in regards to just raw speed. The key is, can he get more stability on this KTM to where he's more consistent in Supercross than he was last year, because he left 87 points on the table in that championship fight with Tomac and Cooper Webb last year. So if he gets half of that back, it doesn't matter if Tomac takes a topple. I'm sorry, if Cooper Webb takes a topple and Tomac loses an Achilles, he wins. There's no question about it. So, and then Aaron Plessinger, you already talked about him. He's a guy that could be a 8 to 12 guy just as easily as he could be a 5 to 10 guy, and a couple of one-off podiums here and there. And he's a guy that the crowd would go absolutely nuts for if he gets his first win finally, especially after it feels like it's owed to him from last season. Everybody
would love that.
The weirdest thing I've heard about Aaron Plessinger is supposedly, and this is coming from Sexton himself from media days, is that he's been trading laps with Sexton at the practice track to where they're both going as hard as they can and just trading who's in the lead. Like,
Which it
imagine
could
to me
be, dude.
that means he's hanging with the fastest man in the sport. Now, obviously, Chase isn't 100% comfortable on that bike yet. Aaron has a little more experience on that platform. He's been on that chassis for the last 2 years. But I don't care. Dadgummit, if you're hanging with the fastest man in the game, it's still debatable between him and Jet or Tomac. It could be any one of those guys any night. But overall, he's the fastest man in the game. If you're hanging with him, that's got to be put into a consideration.
Yeah, well, just a confidence building off of that, you know? I mean, it's got to be huge. Now,
yeah, he's got to be thinking, I'm hanging with, he may not be the most consistent in staying on the bike, but I'm watching him stay on the bike in front of me all the time in practice, and every now and then I'm able to trade with him.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be a confidence booster.
100%.
The other thing I would note is, it's not necessarily on the front of people's minds, but KTM has run a three bike team the last couple of years with Aaron Plessinger and Marvin Musquin and then Cooper Webb. There's no Marvin Musquin this year. Had a really early crash last year. I want to say week 2 or week 3. It might have been right after Anaheim 1. I can't remember, but had a very early exit. I believe it was a broken arm. Didn't return for outdoors. He may have had a Supercross only contract. I can't remember. But so far, he's not only not coming back with KTM, he's not on the entry list right now. So I don't know if Musquin's just quiet quitting, but that is another very notable thing in regards to KTM is just going with the 2 guys in the 450s, and Marvin Musquin is out of the picture.
There you have it. So with this potential for the 2025 chassis, is anybody else using that, or is it just Chase at this point?
So the word is all the riders across KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas will test. I'll get into the other ones a little bit later. Chase is for sure supposed to be using the new 2025 chassis for the reasons I've already explained. It's predicted AP will as well. For all I've heard in regards to the technical side of it is that it's just better in the whoops. I don't think it's going to affect their ability to corner better or handle bowl turns better. I don't think it's going to affect their ability to get good starts. They're not putting in a new power unit. It's just a new chassis. It's not a completely new bike. So I don't exactly know what to think other than what I'm hearing from different sources, different test riders that have tested just the production version of this new chassis early before official production release to the public for the production version. Is that it's just overall better bike and handles the whoops a lot better. That's what I'm hearing.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, let's keep on with the KTM Husqvarna gas team and talk about your favorite guy of all time. Well, not of all time, but of recent time, one could say.
Yes, younger brother of my favorite rider of all time, Malcolm Stewart, racing with Husqvarna. But talking about Husqvarna as a whole, once again, you have to take into mind they have a new chassis that they're testing within a month of right now, or maybe even a little bit later, which obviously you kind of question, okay, if they're testing a new chassis like close to media day, that's when they get access to the new chassis. How ready will they be going into Anaheim 1? Will they be 100% comfortable, or more importantly, they can feel like they're comfortable flying at the test track, because everyone is supposedly flying at the test track, and we'll get into that. Well, with the exception of Cooper Webb, like every year, he's never flying at the test track, and he's like an anomaly. He can like not fly the test track and then just show up and win Anaheim 1. But more importantly, with Husqvarna, and KTM and Gas, these guys are all testing this right now. We know guys who will. We also know some guys that won't. Not won't, that are kind of undetermined. And I think the only guy that's for sure going to take that chassis right now is Chase Sexton. Everyone else is like they probably will, but last thing we heard is they're testing it. So that's something to keep in mind with all these guys. There could be a chance that we still don't know who's on the new chassis going in Anaheim 1. They could keep that under wraps. Who knows? What we do know is, aside from that, is that Malcolm Stewart's flying at the test track. And this is on the account of Christian Craig, his teammate at Husqvarna, Aaron Plessinger, who he rides with at Baker's factory, as well as RJ, his 250 teammate, who also rides with the 450 riders and trains with Malcolm, Christian Craig, and AP, along with other sources like mechanics and other guys, the trainers at the test track. I mean, the word was he was absolutely walking down and gapping Christian Craig, his teammate, and that he's just on a different level. Like the guys in his camp think he could be an Anaheim 1 winner. Quite honestly, last year, his prediction, I mean, my personal prediction was, look, I mean, you look at 2022, we finally saw Malcolm. I mean, that's finally, because he was consistent the 2 years prior. I'll get into that later. But we kind of really got to see with a really, really good factory bike and a whole team dedicated to him as their premier rider. Like, you're our number one. We got to see him take that raw speed he has and add a better level of consistency to it. And he turned into a top 5 machine. He rode a little bit more, not conservatively, but it never looked like he was completely like overriding himself.
Yeah.
Especially in the whoops and, being sketchy. And he turned that into 3rd overall in the points. And people are forgetting that. And when we went into last year, obviously he raced 2 races, crashed in both the main events, won 1 heat race in the second round, and then tore his literally every ligament in his knee except for maybe one in a practice crash before week 3 at Anaheim 2. Just going over a basic double, the bike just slid out on him and rolled, and his whole left leg got pinned under the bike as it rolled. The crazy thing is, on his account and other people's account, he proceeded to then get back on the bike with every ligament in his left knee torn and his kneecap literally shifting in and out of place and dislocating, rode 3 more laps, finished his 20-minute motor or whatever it was, and then pull in and kept complaining about his knees. Like, I think there's an actual problem. Like, he didn't really think it was a season-ending or not a serious injury until he tried to put his bike back on the stand, lift a 200-pound bike and put it back on the stand, which just speaks to how crazy of an athlete these guys are in general, but especially him. So, look, I say all that to say this. You look at where Vital MX and a lot of other big platforms like RacerX kind of rank him in their top 10s and stuff like that. They got him pretty low. Some of them don't even have him in the top 10. Which I think is crazy because we know the speed's there and it's apparently still there. I mean, we'll see when he races people that aren't, Austrian bikes and aren't the people I listed above, but I don't think he's going to have a problem with speed. I think it's still, can he put a full race together and have that speed for a full 20 minutes plus 2? And then, is that speed good enough to crack the top 3 when you have a Tomac, you have a Lawrence, you have a Sexton? I mean,
2 Lawrences.
And 2 Lawrences now, right?
Yeah.
And you have a Ken Roxon. We'll get into that in a minute. Like, that is the question. He will still be one of the fastest guys. I would not be surprised if he is consistently at the top of the timesheets in practice, gets a couple of pole positions and not pole positions, but wins a couple of heat races. He is the fastest qualifier at certain tracks. I think he'll be in play for wins. I think he'll get a couple of podiums. I think the question is, does he convert those chances at podiums into getting his long awaited for first race win? And when that happens, you will hear me yelling from 2 counties over. You would have thought the Texans won the Super Bowl and Jesus Christ came back on the same time.
I've got him ranked pretty high. I think he's going to do very well this season. I think he's come with a vengeance. I don't think he's going to stop until he gets a championship. And every season he's getting better. He's improving. I don't know.
Watch out.
I don't know.
That's all I'm saying, because
I can't agree more.
A lot of people are counting him out as a race winner potential. Like, and more importantly, a consistent race win threat for the predicted top 3. They're like, he'll be in the mix every now and then. He'll have a one-off race where he can be close and at least get a podium, but they don't see. They think his window to win a race is gone. I'm like, okay, you're talking about a guy who led Anaheim 1 for 12 straight minutes, and before he hit false neutral, Anaheim 1 and took a nosedive, which is just a freak accident. It happens to the best people all the time. We saw it multiple times last season to the best of riders. That moment when he landed on that tabletop, before he hit false neutral was going to be when he was going to pass Sexton because Sexton made a mistake. He was going to pass him back, get into second. Tomac was maybe 20 yards away, like about a second off. And we had, I think, 4 laps to go, roughly, taking into account the time and trying to guesstimate. If he wouldn't have hit false neutral, I think he has a shot at running down Tomac in that race because he had that kind of speed. And he had the same amount of speed in round 2. He won the heat race. He ran down 5 guys to do it. And, he crashed twice and I still think finished 11th, I think. After 2, he did it after the second one without a front fender because he wrecked that hard. So, like, do not take him out of the consideration of a potential race winner. That's all I have to say. Obviously, this is my most biased take here of the night because he is my favorite rider. He's many people's favorite riders. Obviously, I think the 2 most loved riders of this entire grid are Aaron Plessinger and Malcolm Stewart because they bring so much more to the table other than just their actual performance. They bring so much more to the sport with just their personalities, their fan engagement, and the excitement they bring, the style, that all the extra, like the stuff you want to see in every rider, they do to an exponential degree, and they're just class of the field in that regard. So, you just go listen to when he was leading for 12 minutes of the Anaheim 1 race and just listen to how loud that crowd was. It was just incredible. So, getting into Christian Craig finally. So, like I said, most biased take of the night right there. Craig is a guy who obviously was going from, once again, he was doing the chassis transition from going from an aluminum frame to a steel frame, from leaving Yamaha to go up to 450s for Husqvarna, be their number 2 guy, not official number 2. We were going into last year questioning, could Christian Craig, like, who was going to be the number 1 rider? Is it going to be Malcolm Stewart or is it Christian Craig? That was a debate at that point. We were thinking Craig could come in and be a top 5 machine and challenge for a win maybe in his first season. And now it's very much okay, we're going into the season, even with Malcolm only racing 2 races, right? It's kind of a justified agreement and unanimous agreement that, okay, Malcolm's the number 1, Craig is the number 2. We're just hoping it's more of a 1B and not a definite 2. We're hoping he turns into a guy who can get some top 5s, maybe maybe he gets on the box, right? Gets a podium. Obviously, I was one of the guys who thought he was going to have a tough year last year, just because of the bike. You're going on to what was a problematic Husqvarna and KTM platform the year before, very problematic. And not only are you doing that, you're doing that having spent the last couple of years on a Japanese bike with the Yamaha, a very, very good Yamaha at that. That was very easy in the whoops for you, very easy, and really just a very easy to ride bike overall. So he did a lot of finding out last season. The whole thing, had a terrible injury in the back half of Supercross, did show some signs of speed. He won a heat race. Granted, it was with a depleted field, but he won a heat race, had that sense of I can get up there. So I'm just hoping he can take that next step to kind of secure the next year of his contract. Well, an extension in his contract, because this is a contract year for him. It is a big deal. Mookie got a 2-year extension, so he's got another season after this guaranteed. This is a bigger deal for Craig, because he needs to come in and show massive improvement. He needs to go from a guy that was battling between 8 to 12 last season and hanging back there with Dean Wilson and some of those guys. No shot to them, but they're just they weren't on the best factory bike. And he needs to take that next step to being a guy that's on the border of pushing top 5s. If he wants to get a 2-year deal, he may get 1 more year at Husqvarna, because right now I don't think there's anyone coming down the 250 pipeline that can replace him on the Austrian side of things. But he needs to show some improvement for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like RJ could come up and be a potential replacement, but who knows? I mean, and they can run 3 guys. It's not as big of not as popular of a model to run 3 guys on 450 right now, but who knows?
But the Austrian brands are the ones that have been doing it most often.
Yeah.
Look at what KTM did. I mean,
yeah.
I think you could see that, especially with the fact that RJ has been down there for a while. And RJ is one of those guys that, everyone at the 250 level says, oh, I'm going to be better on a 450. I'm more comfortable on a 450. Rarely is that actually the case out of the gate. And RJ won a heat race at Daytona, and then I think finished in the top 10. First ever 450 race.
Yeah,
Riding Malcolm's race bike.
racing against Cooper, and Cooper was riding good
And,
in that heat race.
more importantly, he beat Craig. It's tough. So like,
Yeah.
look, I love Christian Craig. I think he has a much higher ceiling than what he rode at the level of last year. Obviously, he's one of the best guys through the whoops, and he just did a lot of finding out in the whoops and just overall last year. So I think he still has a high ceiling, but you only have a small window to find it, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult. But I think all he has to do to get at least another year extension to find out, or let Husqvarna find out if he can be that next guy, is he just got to become a 5 to 10 guy, and he needs to race like it too. He needs to act like, okay, my goal tonight is 5 to 10. I'm gonna have really good racecraft and race like that's my goal, and not take too many risks because I need these points to stack up. I want to be in that 5th to 10th spot in the overall standings. That's just my opinion.
Well, there's another guy that's going to be standing in his way with that, and that's Ken Roczen. We haven't talked about him yet, but you talk about how stacked this field is. We haven't even talked about Ken yet, and Ken is he's a top 3 guy. I mean, what's going on right now, dude? This is crazy.
Well, whatever it is, it's good for the sport, because this time about a year and a half ago, we were wondering if Ken Roczen would still be here or if he would just retire, right? Like, he was as unhappy as it got at that Honda, and had been for a decent amount of time, to the point where, like, I think he raced 5 races in 2022, or maybe just a little bit more, like not even half the season, before he just called it quits.
He took a leave of absence kind of thing, didn't he?
Not just for Supercross, the whole year. The only thing he did was he raced World Supercross, not with Honda. He just got a Honda and raced on it, I believe.
And he
didn't have a deal. I believe he won.
Yeah.
He definitely won last year.
Yeah.
Well, that was last year. So yeah, he won it. So when you're talking about Ken Roczen, you're talking about one of the guys that he could be running in 10th, but you just watch the guy ride, and it's just like poetry. If poetry in motion was a riding style, right? Just watching that dude, he looks like, even when he's struggling the most, he just looks like the most at one with a bike. He makes the most ugly things look easy, right? So, and he's a guy that has some of the best speed ever. Obviously, he's had his share of injuries and health issues that have really plagued him. And then he was really the first one to start suffering from a really temperamental Honda over the last 2 years. And that's part of the reason he left. I think he and Chase are both quoted as saying within the last 2 years of something along the lines of, it doesn't even feel like a Honda anymore. And then all of a sudden, we're at this time last year going to Anaheim 1. We find out he's racing for Suzuki like maybe a week, like maybe like a couple of days before media day.
I think he found out a couple days before media day too.
Probably.
He had no time to test the bike.
All I know is that he showed up to test for Suzuki because, one, I think he may have got paid to. I can't remember, but he was checking a box. He had some other factories in mind that he was testing to see, one, if he could find a bike he was comfortable with, because he knew it wasn't going to be the Honda for him. And he wanted to see, can I find a bike that's comfortable for me, because an uncomfortable Ken Roczen is not going to be able to do anything, and he's not going to be happy. And you got to keep Ken Roczen happy with at least a team in the bike for him to be competitive at all. That's not a diss to him. That's just that's what Kenny needs to win. And if he's not winning or having a shot at winning, then he's going to be miserable, and you're not going to get the best out of him. So he showed up to test Suzuki.
He's going to be comfortable in 2nd or 3rd place, or he's going to be uncomfortable in 10th to 15th.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or just not even show up.
He showed up to test that Suzuki to just check a box and left going, what just happened? And he knew he was going to have to develop it. He knew a lot of work needed to be done. But from what I heard is, everyone was shocked with the announcement, because basically their 450 rider of the year before was Justin Bogle, and we knew that bike was so bad. Like, he and the bike as a whole, the whole team as a whole at the 450 level, were just irrelevant. They were without a doubt the worst team. That was an actual factory team. They were not in the picture. And like, the most relevant thing Justin Bogle did was get knocked off of his bike at 40 miles an hour by Justin Barsha. That was the most relevant thing he did. Like, I hate to say it, like, Suzuki was that bad. And all we could point it to with Ken Roczen's decision with that Suzuki was, hey, what we heard from some test riders is that Suzuki needs a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work for Ken to get it to where he wants it to be in regards to just raw speed. But what we know about a Suzuki is it corners like nobody's business. And that's what we saw from him. We saw he still had trouble in the whoops, especially for the first 5 rounds. It really took him 5 rounds to get any kind of comfortable. I think he pulled a whole shot. Anaheim won and held that for about like a lap or two or a lap and a half.
Which is
and
basically,
then all of a sudden,
yeah, that gave him. I mean, if you think about how much time he had to test and then how much into the season he was, he'd been on the bike for maybe a month or two. So
yeah, and we see a guy go from questioning whether he still wants to do or even belongs in the sport, even knowing he's still one of the most talented guys, and even knowing that the whole sport itself, the media guys, those who ride with him and were beating him, knowing, okay, he's better than this. Like regardless of what he's riding, he's still a top 5 talent, maybe top 3, not 3 talent. He went from that of questioning what he was going to do to winning in Indianapolis, and all of a sudden we see a freaking kickstart pedal on the podium. So, and then we saw him get 2nd overall in the Super Motocross playoff, and we saw him be the only guy that was able to lead laps in motocross other than Jet Lawrence.
And
right?
he was, I mean, I think he was playing it safe a little bit in motocross, but he was putting the screws to Jet.
I mean, he just showed up because he wanted to. He did one race. He led a couple of laps on it, got 2nd, had a great time. He was doing it for funsies while he was in between Supercross and World Supercross. And we were so excited to see him because we know he's an absolute beast outdoors. Like, absolutely, he's amazing. And then he goes to World Supercross, wins that. And then he was the best overall 450 finisher, I believe. Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, he won the overall for like single 450 performance in World Supercross. I mean, it's not World Supercross. Motocross the Nations, which is basically the Olympics of Supercross. Each country is sending 3 riders, 2 450, 1 250. The single person performance is not necessarily the most important thing. It's whichever country comes out on top. But he had the highest point total in Motocross the Nations, beating Jet Lawrence in regards to points. So, I mean, he just looks like he keeps gaining momentum. And now it's being talked about as he could be that guy who he could be the 4th best guy. He could be getting in the realm of 2nd and 3rd and getting, he could turn 1 race win in 2023 to 4 race wins in 2024 or higher than that. You don't know what you're getting with him. So he's one of the many, and there will be many, big wild cards here. And the other thing I'll note is he's training with Chase Sexton, which I don't know if that helps Chase at all, because you're giving Ken. I think Chase is the only giver in that scenario. Because
I think that helps Ken for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
because the one thing Ken was
Chase
missing was that intensity and something in someone to push him to get that full 20 minutes even when he was uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and when you're racing with the fastest dude, and you can also be whenever you want the fastest dude. I mean, I think both those guys get better to some degree, but I think Kenny's absolutely the winner of the two of them from that situation.
Yeah, I think the only guy that could be training with Chase where Chase would gain confidence and it would help him in that department would be Eli. Because I think besides Eli, Chase thinks he's faster than everybody else, which he is. He is. Yeah. Eli's just got something. He's got like old man strength, where like he'll he'll show up and like whenever your dad comes and absolutely smokes you in something when you're a child, and he could destroy all your friends too, but he just goes back to whatever he's doing. That's kind of like how I feel about Eli is, That's how he is.
Well, but here's the thing with Eli. He's still only 31, maybe 32. All I know is he and Malcolm Stewart and Justin Barcia and somebody else on the grid that is a big player, I forget who, are all the same age. The difference is Eli Tomac just has way more miles on him. Maybe Christian Craig.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's 30 or maybe 31, but they're all the same age.
Is Malcolm really 31?
Yes.
Dude, I still, for some reason in my head, Malcolm is like 25.
And look, you're proving my point. The reason you think that is Eli Tomac has been doing this since he was 15, 16, 17 nonstop, right? God. He has way more miles on him. Yeah. Like literally miles on him than Justin Barcia, than Malcolm Stewart, then Christian Craig, and then a lot of other guys that are either older than him or the same age. It's similar to Ryan Villapoto and Dungey, where these guys retire at 27, or at least move past their prime at 27 and start racing part time because they feel like they've done it all.
Yeah.
They feel like they can't lose. They don't want to lose because they go on streaks of championships, something like that. We didn't see that with Tomac. We spent many years wondering when is he finally going to do it, and then he finally did it and hung around for another couple of years, won a second championship, almost a third. But more importantly, these other guys have had similar careers and retired much earlier. And the average retirement age for the sport is 27. That's changing. We're seeing that. I mean, look at who's like half. We had a podium full of dads with their kids on there with Barsha, Roxon, and who was the other guy? Was it not AC? I forget. There was literally it was one of maybe it was El Hombre. Yeah, it was really funny. Yeah. We had a whole podium full of dads and their wives and holding babies on the podium next to the trophy. It was like I was like, wow, look how the sport has come. Like, usually a lot of these guys are not turning into family men while they're still racing, and now they are. Yeah. They're able to hang around that long for whatever reason. And Tomac's he's the anomaly because while this has happened and other guys have maybe taken breaks or they've went Supercross only for a while to kind of let their bodies rejuvenate, Deuce has been putting it on. And I think it sounds like it's going to be his last year. He's only doing Supercross only. He could do outdoors. He could do SMX. He has those clauses in the contract. Nobody knows. All we know is we get him for sure for 17 more races.
Is it just me, or does Eli Tomac look like the perfect guy for like a New Balance commercial? Like pushing a lawnmower. Like he looks like New Balance, such A6, a classic dad.
Like he's got a pair of Hokas in the back of the car ready at all times. Yeah. If he's going to a wedding, he's kind of like me with my bad feet to where, okay, I'm strategically planning, okay, for the first hour for the ceremony, the dress shoes are on. Mm-hmm. When we get halfway through the celebration afterwards, the reception, once the speeches are over and it's all dance floor time, we go to the truck real quick. We just hop out. We grab the Hokas. We're good. Right.
Or better yet, he's trying to go home and go to bed because he's got a long day of
he's got to put the kids to sleep.
Yeah. He's got to put the kids to sleep. He's got honeydew projects the next day.
He's got to do taxes.
Probably someone else's taxes. He might be a tax man himself.
Could be.
He might be the tax man,
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, let's keep moving along here. You mentioned Jason Anderson for a second. What is going on with Cowie? Are they going to be able to have anybody riding for them by the end of the year, or will they all be in the infirmary?
Maybe the answer is yes. I don't know, because the big thing with both of these guys is I think Adam Cianciarulo performed to expectations last year because he's coming off of that really bad injury. I mean, he's had a plague of injuries since he went 450 in 2020. And it sucks because we're talking about a guy that we thought could be the next Jet and looked like it.
Before Jet.
It's just been a string of bad luck for him. And, I think he's having to. So I think last year he knew he was not going to be in play for wins. He knew he had to ride like he was not in play for wins. I think he pulled like 4 hole shots last year in Supercross alone.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to win, but there was definitely moments there where it's like, oh shit, could Adam like hang on to this thing? And every time he ended up kind of slowly fading back to about 5th to 8th spot. But I mean, there was some races. He pulled hole shots. He led for a little bit. And did he have some top 5s? I think towards the end of the season,
he had a podium
getting injured.
Yeah, he had one podium, and it was with a depleted field, but it meant so much to him. He was crying on the podium. I think it was a feel-good moment for everybody because it's so tough to watch a guy in this position because for those who don't know, he's got a really bad nerve issue from several really bad wrecks. I believe in his left hand, I think, one of his hands and wrists. So where basically when he gets like 10 minutes through a main event, like he'll just lose feeling in his hands. Like he could still move it. He just won't feel a thing, which is so important because like, how do you know if you actually have control of your handlebars if you can't feel them and shift the gears? Like it's just wild. And obviously eventually it affects his grip strength as well. So he has to back off for his own safety and also just so he can stay on the bike and try to regain some of that feeling from that. That's what I understand so far. And last season, it was almost depressing to watch him at sometimes because like, man, the guy is so, like capable of so much more, and you can see the look in his eyes before and after races that he knows he is too. His own body is limiting him, right? So what I understand is, and I think this is kind of what we saw over the progression of, Supercross, motocross, and then the SMX playoff with him. It looks like it seems from his own account that the nerve issue is getting better, but it's still not gone. So I wouldn't see him as a race win or consistent podium competitor. I think he's a 5 to 10 guy, and I think he's going to stay there.
Yeah.
Jason Anderson's a different story. He's a guy that has won a Supercross championship at the 450 level with Husqvarna. He took it to Eli Tomac, was the only guy that took it to Eli Tomac in the championship in 2022. They had a fantastic battle. I remember when he won, when he went back and forth with Tomac at Dallas. I got to see that in person. He also knocked over Malcolm Stewart at Dallas. I'm trying to forget that because Mookie could have won the overall if he hadn't fallen down at that Triple Crown race. It's fine. I'm fine. Don't talk to me. But more importantly, Jason Anderson, it's fine. I'm fine. Jason Anderson was supposed to be the guy that was still expected to take it to Tomac. I mean, all the commercials last year for like the Monster Energy Sport sponsored ones it's Chase Anderson and Tomac, Chase Anderson and Tomac. And
yeah,
2 of those guys were there. One was not, and it was Anderson. Had a terrible year, had some off-track issues. Obviously, he was becoming a dad. He had to race at Atlanta, I think it was, at the Speedway off of he just didn't sleep because his child was being born the race before and just had nothing to give. Like he won a heat race, and then I think he finished like 16th or something like that because his body just gave up.
Yeah, and he started out the season hot, and he got put on probation, not like real probation, like racing probation.
Yeah.
And
he had beef with Barsha. They kept colliding.
It seemed like after that, he really, well, obviously he doesn't want to, get any more punishments or anything. And so it seemed like he was having to race a little more conservatively. And I don't think that he had malintent with any of those collisions. It seemed like they were riding and stuff happens, but then it's like, okay, I cannot let anything happen, whether it's my fault, I meant to do it, I had any bad intentions, whatever. You can't hit anybody at that point. And so I think that really toned down his riding style to where he wasn't able to go as fast as he would have liked.
Well, and here's the thing. The most important thing that makes both of these guys in regards to their overall performance such a wild card and is really the pivot point for this whole team is the bike. Kawasaki had a brand new bike for last season. Was not the same one that Anderson took Tomac to the next level with in 2022, and just massively struggled on it. Both of them were talking about. They were on the same bike. They made changes to it, I believe, and it just went in the complete wrong direction. The question last year was Tomac's on a new bike. Can he make that work? That's what it was. I kind of had it flipped. They were still on the old bike, but they did make some changes to it, and it just would not cooperate. They were using, I believe it was BFRC shocks. So they weren't using factory shocks with that bike last year. That was another thing. It struggled on the whoops, and they also struggled with cornering as well consistently in regards to just being able to maintain a good top speed around bull turns, especially being able to cut down late in the races and take inside lines. But both of these guys, it wasn't just one guy having an issue and being on record about it. Both of these guys consistently said they're uncomfortable with the bike. So you take that into account with Jason Anderson of having some off the track, personal life stuff that just took more of his energy away from him. He also didn't have, he had complaints about his program, said he didn't have a good program put together for that season. So we've kind of, in regards to what we're hearing now, it seems like all the boxes for a Jason Anderson return in regards to the top 5 is there because he's got a new trainer for 2024, a new program. Both of these guys have a new bike, and the word on what this new bike / new frame is bringing to the table is, number one, they're actually getting factory suspension / shocks now. They're not using BFRC shocks anymore. They have Kawasaki factory shocks on this bike that are designed specifically for the new frame to go together as one whole piece, like designed all in the same room, which is a good thing to hear, in my opinion, because obviously Kawasaki should not be struggling in the whoops like they were last season, and just struggling overall like they were last season. So, from the technical aspect, that's all we have to go off of for this new Kawasaki frame / bike. But I would look for these guys to allow them to corner better in the 180-degree bowl turns, which is something they struggled with last year. Be a little bit better in the whoops. But I think where you'll best see whether this new bike makes or breaks, like on making an impact, is later in the race when they have the opportunities in those bowl turns that go 180 degrees to cut down in order to execute passes and just find better lines. And then, of course, can they, like every bike has got to be able to make it through the whoops, so that's the biggest test. It's supposed to be better in both of those. So that's the biggest outlook for that. All those technical details is on the account of Chris Kiefer from the RacerX website and platform. He was a very, very highly renowned test rider. So I take his opinion, with the utmost regard. He's kind of like the guru when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, look for what's supposed to be an improved season from both of these guys. But Adam Cianciarulo kind of did what he needed to do to stay around. I don't think Kawasaki's cutting him anytime soon because he is taking that definite role number 2. The guy who's got to make it happen is Jason Anderson. And an interesting statistic is if you look at his career standing finishes over the last couple seasons, he has a great year, then he has a terrible year. Then he has a great year, then he has a terrible year. Like he wins the 450 Supercross championship with Husqvarna, then has a terrible season the next season. And then he takes it to Tomac, gets close, and then he has a terrible season last year. So,
are you saying he's going to win the championship this year?
If I'm an Aggie. I can't do math, but if you just carry the one and you do the long division, he's due for a good season. The
Jason Anderson championship. Are you saying Jason Anderson championship?
I want to go on record as saying no, but I am saying I think he has impacts on races. I think he has an impact on the championship. He could even be a player in it. He could be mathematically in it till the very end.
Yeah,
I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna win it. He could be kind of like how Cooper Webb was. Not even. I would say that he could be kind of like how a Malcolm Stewart was in 2022, where he's a top 5 machine. He's getting 4 to 5 podiums, maybe closer to 6. Who knows? And he's somewhere in the top 5 in the standings by the end of the year, which for him, that's a massive step from where he was last season. And if he gets, I think he'll get a race win.
Okay. I think that's a conservative and probably realistic expectation. I could see that.
Well, the last thing I want to say, I almost forgot about this. To give you an idea of how bad this bike was, and really honestly, the lack of performance from Kawasaki across the board last season. If you think about their 250s, they had they need wherever their pro circuit guys for the 250 class, the lights class practice, they need to get a Catholic priest out there with holy water. And when they water the dirt, they need to just put holy water into that water when they water the track. They need to put sage out on that whole field. And they need Oprah down there to just be there present when they're riding on that track, because they had 4 season-ending injuries on that track or not season ending, but majority of the season. I think of their 5 guys, I think the only guy left to race in Supercross was Cameron McAdoo. You had to bring a 38-year-old or 35, whatever it was, arena cross rider. Yeah, Chris Blows. You had to bring him back, so you would just have someone to race in the other coast. It's just a wild thought. So
they need to invest in some bubble wrap. I think that's what they need.
I mean, we got robbed of Seth Hamaker, eventually Cameron McAdoo, Austin Faulkner. His whole 2023 Supercross season lasted 1 main event gate drop. Didn't even make it to the turn. He made it halfway down the straight, dude. Yeah. And before he broke his femur, he tore 3 ligaments. It was terrible. That sums up Kawasaki last year, because here's the thing. Joe Shimoda didn't even really get started or really do much. I can't remember if he raced in Supercross, but I think he may have had a practice injury like most of the guys did. But if it weren't for Joe Shimoda, get this, if it weren't for Joe Shimoda, when he won the final race of the motocross season, It would have been Kawasaki's first winless season as a whole since 1982. Think about that.
That's crazy.
That's how bad it was for Kawasaki across the board last season. So that's
Wow.
why they put so much time into this new bike, and they're riding on it a lot. Because I don't think it was all Anderson personally. Obviously, Adam Cianciarulo also is on record saying, "Hey, I'm uncomfortable with this bike. I'm having trouble with it.
Yeah.
This bike could make or break both of these guys' seasons."
All right, let's go to Jason Anderson's arch nemesis this last season, Mr. Justin Barcia, and the Gas team as a whole.
Yep.
What are we thinking here? Justin Barcia, top 5?
I don't know what to think about him, but if we go off of history, he turns into a podium threat and a top 5 machine and showing his best pace overall, getting some random one-off wins when it's his contract year. And then when it's not his contract year, he's kind of like a porcupine. He can get great starts, and then he has great finishes because he gets a great start, and no one wants to try to pass him because, well, you're going to get Barcia. You're going to get tossed off your bike like you're on the back of a bucking Bronco.
A lot of
and
risk.
You're going to get bucked off,
Yeah.
like the dude, I have a toxic view on Barcia. It really is because he's such a funny personality, and he has this like easygoing guy reputation off the track, but still like kind of a wild, crazy Travis Pastrana like personality. If you catch my drift, and it's like he continues to like wreck some of my favorite riders. Like I said, when he wrecked Malcolm Stewart. I'm sorry, that was Jason Anderson. No. He did wreck when he wrecked Malcolm Stewart at Salt Lake. Ended up tearing Malcolm's meniscus on a move that had no shot at working. Like wrecked Malcolm so bad, his bike stayed in the shot of the camera. Himself went out of frame. That's how bad it was. And then I was so pissed at him for so long for that, because it basically meant that Malcolm Stewart had to rehab for half the motocross season. We got him for like the last couple of rounds, and then that was it. And then part of the way through the season, I'm like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I like his personality. I'll forgive it. And then he wrecks somebody else that I care about, like a Chase Sexton or someone else. I'm like, every time I get to the point where I'm liking you again, you do something stupid. And I know it's because he's a massive competitor in a lot of moments, but there's a reason they call him Bam Bam, and he's ruined a lot of people's nights. So, anywho, in regards to his performance, I'm curious to hear your take on this. I could be way off on this one, but since it's not a contract year, you really don't know what you're going to get, because this is a guy that you've seen him mail in a couple times. You've also seen him be a one-off. He could win. He's a guy that could go out and win Anaheim 1, this Saturday, and then just ride off into the sunset and be a freaking 8 to 10 guy. And then, the next time you see him is when he just, tosses someone off of a bike. Like he's built like a, just an absolute brick. You just don't know what's going to go down. I think the main thing is his future is somewhat in question, because I think it's pretty obvious he's not going to race beyond 2026. I think he's got one more season left, and then I think he's going to have to start planning his exit strategy with Troy Lee's design specifically. And I don't think there's going to be another factory team that would want to take him on after that. He could do it like what a Dean Wilson is doing and just stay around relevant in the sport and race with a half privateer, half factory team. I don't know. Could be a Firepower Honda situation, but especially when you have Jorge Prado, which is someone we can also get into when we're talking about gas, because he is technically gas. He's coming into the picture. That could be something Justin Barcia has to look at. So for those that don't know, Jorge Prado, he's a 22-year-old MXGP rider coming over from MXGP. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's motocross in Europe. They just call it MXGP. The tracks are a little different than outdoor nationals. I would almost say like the best thing you can watch to kind of see what an MXGP track would look like is go watch the Motocross the Nations. Like that's the MXGP track. It's a little bit different than just an outdoor national. It's really cool. I'm probably going to watch some races this season to just see how he does, and also watch Jeffrey Harlings as well, because he's an amazing rider. But he won the 450 MXGP World Championship as a 22-year-old. But he's always, and that was last year. But he's always had this dream of ever since he was little, he's wanted to come over to the States and race American Supercross because he's always viewed that as the biggest spectacle. So for the first 3 races of this season, he's going to race the 450 Supercross first 3 races, and he's already been doing testing. He just wants to get a taste of it because he's still contracted to race in MXGP for the remainder of 2024. So do that season, then he can kind of go do what he wants. At least it's what his contract with Gas/KTM says. Honestly, if it goes well enough, like if he comes out and wins 2 of the 3 races, maybe he has enough pull. Like supposedly he has more pull with KTM/Gas than Chase Sexton currently, or Cooper Webb did before he left. Like that's how big he is with them. So maybe he could just rip the contract up and say, "Hey, let's do this," and okay, we'll rip it up and burn it out back. I don't know, but in regards to Gas, I don't know if he'll be a Gas guy in Supercross when he does come here in 2025, because that's seeming more evident than, inevitable than not. He could go Gas because that's what he's currently riding right now. But in MXGP, it's kind of weird. What I've heard is that you can basically ride whatever you want if you need to. Just put the whatever factory you're signed with stickers on it, and supposedly what he rides is basically a KTM with a gas sticker on it, which is really weird because I don't know how much difference there is between a KTM and a gas because they share the same frame, and I don't know. But a lot of people are saying he may end up just being a KTM guy instead of going down Gas's route. That would be more fortunate for Justin Barcia if that's the case. But if it's not, and he does race under Gas, that could mean the boot a little bit sooner than later for Justin Barcia, or it at least means that Barcia could end up having a teammate for 1 year and being told, "Hey, look, this is kind of like your last year. We want to transition you out smoothly. Take that what you will." I don't know, and I don't know how he would take that, but that's kind of the whole Gas picture. Prado is going to race with a Gas. It won't be a Troy Lee Designs Gas because of riding gear contract restrictions. He has his own deal, so it's just going to be a Gas and with his own gear and whatever. But he could absolutely be a guy that takes on that Gas #1 role in just a year's time, and he's a world talent. He could be a guy that comes out and is a podium guy in Anaheim 1, or he could be a guy that runs in the top 3, gets a great start for about 5 minutes, and then crashes out. It's his first time doing Supercross. You don't know, but the talent's there. James Stewart is on record as being impressed with what he's seen at the practice track, just the film of him testing. Prado has a habit of getting great starts and then taking off and never being seen again. And sometimes when he doesn't get it's questionable on how good he can work his way through large fields of riders when he doesn't get good starts. But we haven't seen a good enough sample size of that apparently in MXGP, because he's like the start king. So honestly, you could see this guy pull a whole shot in Anaheim 1 and then maybe dust for a lap, and then everyone starts to catch up to him when he gets close to the whips. He's another big wild card. But in regards to Justin Barcia, the other thing I'm hearing is he was a lot of the guys in the Austrian bike group of KTM, Gas, Husqvarna have had complaints about the old frame, 2022 through 2024, since or even last year's frame or whatever. I think they made slight changes to last year's frame. They've had complaints about it and have voiced their opinion on it. Justin Barcia is the only rider amongst these 3 different teams who specifically said he loved the frame. And it's looked like he's probably going to be the only guy predicted to stick with it for this season and not take the 2025 frame, which is weird, especially if it's better on the whoops. But for whatever reason, he says it works for him. Good for him. We'll see if you're a top 5 guy or not. I don't think he will be. I think he's a guy that could be more in the 5 to 8 category, with the 5 being on maybe the 50% of the time. And I don't know. What do you think about Barcia? Because I know, you and I have had some definite deferring opinions on him.
I think he has the talent. and not the desire. I don't think at this point. I think at this point he is wanting to go out and have a good time and ride dirt bikes for a living. I don't think that he's looking for a championship. I think that I wouldn't say the ship has sailed, but like for him to have everything he wants, I don't think a championship is in that. I just think that I don't think that he's, you know what I mean? Like if you go and ask him like, "Hey, what are your goals for this year?" I would think that a Supercross championship is like third on his list.
I mean,
And
this
if
was
it's
a guy
not
who
your
came out
top,
and he had the red plate for
yeah,
like he had a cup of tea with the red plate in 2022, and then Tomac just took off with it.
yeah,
And when he had the red plate, it was really weird how like the sport as a whole was not talking about him hanging around with it for a long time, and neither was he.
yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah, I just don't think that he wants it.
Well, I mean, it's he's so hard to read because he makes most of his infuriating mistakes on my part that impact my favorite riders when he's going balls to the wall.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to think. There's so many wild cards like him where you could just as easily predict his downfall as you could him coming up and just having a career year, all
Mhm.
within this year. But I want to get your opinion on Prado. Obviously, as Americans, we haven't dipped into MXGP that much, but
Yeah.
just from all the hype we're seeing around him, he's going to be racing number 111. And he's gonna be turning a lot of heads just from the name alone and the world title he comes carrying here. Um, Number one, how do you think he's going to be a guy in play for even top fives? And number two, do you think he's going to be? I mean, do you think he's going to be able to adapt to the Supercross track to any degree of consistency? Like, is this a guy that like he's great on 90% of the track and he gets to the whoops? More importantly, not whoops on the test track, whoops that have been beaten down by a whole series of heat races for both classes, and then a 250 main event plus LCQs and all that stuff. Where the 450 riders are on record saying a lot of times, "Hey, a lot of times we're skimming on the whoops over some bare pieces of wood." Like,
Mhm.
do you think he's going to be able to handle that? I think that's where he's going to have trouble.
Yeah, I don't think that he's going to be able to hang with him the full race in a situation like that. I think that he's probably going to be able to get a good start and be running top 5 for the first half of the race, and then I think he's going to start to fade. Um, but he could come out and hang on.
But
Sorry about that.
no, you're good.
Excuse me. And definitely surprise everybody like a Max Anstey situation, where he came out and was just swinging. Now, Max had ridden Supercross previously, hadn't he?
I believe
If
so.
I'm not mistaken. So that can change things a little bit because he obviously if you've ridden it before, you know what to expect. You kind of have an idea of what you're getting into. Now, he is on a good team, right? That's got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge to give him. Um, so yeah, I think by the third race, maybe he's got it figured out a little bit better. But I don't think he's coming out and winning race one. I think maybe
No,
he could maybe pull a whole shot. Maybe you know anybody, it could be their night. They get a good run down the line and they can pull a whole shot. So
I mean, we saw Colt 45 do it.
yeah,
Even with all his difficulties last year, and I say difficulties, we'll talk about him in a little bit, but Colt Nichols was a guy that was looking like he wasn't going to have a factory ride, but he was rookie of the year.
yeah,
So that was wild. But yeah, Prado, he's interesting. And I think
hmm
it's kind of fun to be able to just get a taste of a world talent with the expectation of, okay, we're getting a preview. He's trying this out. He doesn't have any kind of expectation with him because we know it's his first time doing this.
yeah,
But he brings so much talent to the table that it's like, well, freaking anything's possible. I mean,
yeah,
I almost have this feeling that it's like guaranteed with the reputation he has for pulling off whole shots in MXGP that he will get a whole shot, whether if it's for a heat race or a main event. I almost predict with how good he is at starts in general coming out of gates, I would not be. I would almost predict that he'll get a whole shot. I don't think he's going to hold on to it. I don't even think he's going to be a top 5 guy. I think he's going to be maybe 5 through 10, maybe 8 through 12. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think he's definitely going to show flashes of speed throughout certain parts of the track. And I wouldn't be surprised if he pulls a whole shot, dude.
I could see it. We got another problem though right now is we've been talking about guys that are 1 through 5, 5 through 10. We've mentioned, I believe, a lot more than 10 guys.
Yep.
Somebody's getting kicked out. Somebody's not part of the club.
I think, and I think it comes down to Supercross in general. There's a lot of guys that will be a 5 to 10 guy or an 8 to 12 guy.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of guys that will be the guys that, like that's their best, but can they do their best every night? Right. So there is a lot of guys that will be sitting with a good amount of top 5s, good amount of top 10s.
Mm-hmm.
A good amount being somewhere within, maybe it's what they do in half to 40% of their races, right? Like that's considered their peak. They're a top 10 guy.
Yeah.
But what will sort them out is how often do they do it? That sounds like an obvious statement, but in Supercross, it means everything. You've got guys that have won more races than the guy who wins the championship. And because of the mistakes they make in the other parts of the season, when they have their lows are so low from just an epic fail or a DNF or whatever it was, or just a complete off night, that they'll win more races than the guy who wins the whole thing, but they won't win the championship. That's how Cooper Webb won in both of his titles, because he's got that dog in him. That dog in him. Okay, so that's always there. That best describes the sport. You have all this talent, but it's and these guys are good. These guys are gonna have flashes of brilliance. It's a matter of how often does that get to come out.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. All right. Well, let's transition over and take a look at some of these what we would call half factory, half privateer. Like with Molly, they're
full factory.
They're full factory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a look at these guys. We got Colt 45. You were talking about him earlier. Mm-hmm. Rookie of the year. Could be a season. What do you think?
Well, I think the definition of his season is, he has a fantastic season if he finishes 8th or higher for me. Like, that's just fantastic. That is completely overshooting expectations, because not only are you on your second year in 450s, and you didn't even race all the races last year. You had an injury towards the end. You had an injury in the middle of it. He came into the series last year with like not even a month of testing on that Honda. It was a last minute, add in, and he came into the series coming off of a massive injury after winning his 2021 250 Supercross title, where he was absolutely the better rider between him and Christian Craig. And that shocked a lot of people. He kind of came out of nowhere. And then, he comes into Honda. He has a hot start. I think he got P6 or P5 in Anaheim 1, but in the process of that race, he kind of he tore his groin, not all the way, but he had a really, really high strain or tear in his groin that kind of lingered throughout the whole season. He's also dealing with getting that Honda set up to where he can consistently get comfortable on it, which took the whole season. It's just, as good of a rookie year as it was for him. The standard wasn't very high because the rookies we had last season, it's him and Christian Craig, really, right? I can't think of anyone else that was a true rookie in there in the Supercross season that was playing, at that level. And he definitely, it wasn't by a huge margin, but because of Christian Craig's injury, he definitely was going to get the nod. And he also did a little bit better than Craig. So, it's just funny that, your rookie of the year was possibly going to be out of a factory ride, like I said earlier. But thank goodness he went from possibly looking at racing part-time this season in Supercross with Rick Ware Racing, which is what he did to race in motocross a little bit part-time, and then World Supercross. And he had to privateer himself for the playoff that he qualified for. Had to race a couple of the motocross races to qualify for that playoff. And I think he ended up finishing 8th or something like that, and got a good amount of money from it. So more power to him. But more importantly, he is basically he's now going to be the face of this new 450 team in Liquid Moly Beta. And in my opinion, he's going to be their bell cow. Yes, you have Benny Bloss in the picture, but I think Benny, as talented as he can be, he's never put together the consistency required to be someone's bell cow for a team and be really the true face of their program. I think Colt will still struggle early because this is a brand new bike, a brand new bike specific to Supercross. Yes, Liquid Moly Beta, specifically Beta, they did compete in MXGP last year, so it's not like this is the first time they're assembling a dirt bike. But Supercross setups on bikes is much different than that of motocross setup, specifically suspension, right? So it's going to take time to get that dialed in. They're an Italian brand, so I actually didn't know where they were going to sit with frame. I was like, they could just as easily go to an aluminum frame like the Japanese guys as they could a steel frame. They ended up going steel frame. So what I've heard from Colt Nichols is what he's revealed so far in the testing process, because one of the things Colt Nichols is known so far right now as being is a very, very good test rider and a very, very good rider in regards to developing a bike over the course of a season. So he really was the perfect guy for Beta to pick up as the face of this new program. But it's so funny because they signed Bloss first. And part of that was because of the situation Colt was in. He was in the middle of trying to make the SMX playoff, and he was talking to multiple people, and he just couldn't commit to these guys at the window he was originally given, but was able to come back and renegotiate with them and test the bike. And all of a sudden he went from being out of a factory ride to being with them. And I think it's a really cool story, but the word is the bike overall is heavy. Just in general, it's a heavier 450. They're working on it. More importantly, it's nose heavy. So the front end of that bike seems to be a little bit heavier, which translates to it kind of bucking around like a Bronco on the whips, right? You think of the fact that you have to lead with that front wheel each individual bump and rely on that front end rebound. If you have more weight there, you are doing this the whole time, right? You are wrestling that thing. You're not going to look like a prime James Stewart, Malcolm Stewart, Christian Craig, Eli Tomac, just looking like you're colliding over those suckers. The more weight you have on the front end of that thing, the more you are dancing side to side, right? So I would look for him to struggle a little bit in the whoops, for sure. And maybe even overall, I'd say the first 5 to 8 rounds. And then as that bike gets some upgrades and that he continues to dial in the setup and that bike just develops overall, he could turn into a top 10, guy by the end of the season. But I'm just super excited that we get to have another team in Liquid Moly Beta, because honestly, having the same teams in the sport in general and having that limited number of 450 factory rides, I think has held the sport back for a while. So it's, with Liquid Moly Beta coming into the picture, you're getting Triumph in 450s next year. They're going to have Joey Savacci be their 450 factory rider in Supercross next year, and they may get one other guy. And then the other word on the street, and it's been announced that Ducati's coming into the picture. We don't know when they're going to enter Supercross and American Motocross, but they're racing the Italian Outdoor Series, it seems, and maybe American Motocross. I have no idea, honestly. We're seeing more factory rides come into the sport, and that's exactly what it needs. We don't need to just have these heat races be, okay, we know anybody with a factory ride should be expected to, and absolutely will, barring any kind of a crazy crash, make the main. And they're expected to finish somewhere between 1st and 12th. And if you're not a factory rider, good luck fighting for 13th to 20th. The best sports are where everyone at least has some kind of a crazy chance at a win, right? And can't be said for all the privateers. Yes, in theory, some privateer could one-off win a race. It hasn't happened in a long time. The biggest thing is seeing privateers make mains and get a top 10. Dean Wilson getting a top 10 will be a big deal this year since he's going to be a privateer. Josh Hill getting that podium last year was absolutely insane. And it took a absolute decimated field for it to happen. Right. Or not. I don't know if I said Josh. I think it was Justin Hill that did that. So anywho, I'm happy we have another team. I think it's great long-term for Colt because he gets an opportunity to establish himself as a primary identity affiliated with this team, and his expectations are now lowered, which is good, like, which sounds bad, but it's because of the fact that now he's expected to struggle a little bit early on. He's expected to have to take some time to get into the forefront of this field with this new bike, because he's not just building up himself, he's building up a whole new brand that just launched. And I think that's really cool. I think he's the perfect guy in the perfect position to do it, because you're not going to be able to get a guy like a Ken Roczen to go do this right now. Like he did it with Suzuki because he was that comfortable with the bike, and he also raced for them before, mind you. You ain't going to pull in a Tomac. You ain't going to pull in a Sexton. They're not going to race on something that's unproven. But Colt's got the amount of upside talent to take that bike and do and ride out, like, outside of its potential upwards. But he's also got the testing experience to develop that bike into a potential podium bike within a year and a half to 2 years. So Benny Bloss will be a guy that I think his expectation for a good season is to just race all 17 rounds. If he does that, great. And he could finish. He could have good finishes. He could have terrible finishes. Who knows? He's a guy that shows flashes. But I think my outlook for him is it's a good season for him, and he's doing what he's supposed to do. If he just races all 17 rounds and makes all 17 mains, that's my particular opinion. But I don't know. I mean, do you think that these guys have any kind of a higher ceiling than getting a couple top tens on their first year with Beta?
That's really tough to say where the ceiling is at. I definitely think that if they can get some top tens and maybe one of them is able to finish 8 through 12, I think that's a success. But as far as where their ceiling is at, that's tough. I think we'll know a lot more after that first race to see, how competitive is the bike. How are the two riders looking? Does it look like if they don't do so good, it's on them or on the bike itself, and get their comments on it. Yeah, but again, dude, a guy that's 5 to 10 last year is potentially looking at being a 10 to 15 guy this year. So just because of a stacked field, I mean, you want to talk about picking a bad time to come into the sport. Like, yeah, it's great, but it's also like, this is a competitive spot to be in. If they can develop the bike though these next couple of years, and then maybe Colt doesn't end up being their guy, but they get it a little bit more dialed in, and then they can get maybe not an Eli Tomac, but somebody with some more experience to come over and ride it. That could be something. So yeah, I think 8 to 12 finish for them, great season.
That's fantastic for them. If they have one of their two riders finish between 8 and 12, fantastic.
Yeah.
I will say I would go ahead and book it for Colt to be able to be a top, like in regards to overall standings. He should be able. I think he's a guy that will crack the top 10 next season with this bike, unless it really starts off that bad to where like him just being able to finish all 17 rounds healthy without like getting tossed off and like breaking a leg or something like that. If he's able to race all 17 rounds this season and log all that data, continue to test and develop that thing, and they continue to give him the absolute freedom to be their bell cow, and okay, you want to put these forks on there? Sure, we'll ship them from wherever we gotta pull them to put them on there. If he continues to get the freedom that they are supposed to be giving him, and they continue to listen to his feedback, and he really is treated as their bell cow, I think he transforms that bike quicker than I think anyone else available could. And I see him cracking the top 10 next year in the overall standings, maybe getting the podium. Who knows? That's next year. That's next year. But I just love that we're getting another team. I want to see 20 guys on competitive factory rides, not just factory rides, competitive factory rides within another 3 years. That's what I love to see. I think that takes the sport to the next level. It could mean the elimination of privateers, at least, the bottom, for lack of a better description, the bottom 5% of the pack. I think some privateer teams like, Muck Off Yamaha or Club MX stick around, but that, those guys showing up in vans and, a CRX 450 or 250. I think if those guys get turned into factory rides with trailers and everything, and we have the whole field to the same standard and same equipment availability as a Chase Sexton or a Jet Lawrence, the sport gets that much better. But yeah, so who else do we have left to talk about?
Well, I know I said we were talking about half privateer, half factory, but Liquid Moly Beta is full factory. But Firepower Honda is sort of the half and half, and they've got him a factory guy who might be pretty solid this year if he's meshing with the bike, and that's Dylan Ferrandis.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about him. He's a guy that has speed, has struggled to control it the last 2 years. But when he's been a guy that can be capable of podiums any given night. He's also been somewhat toxic for Yamaha to have the last couple seasons because he holds nothing back to the media about how he likes or dislikes the bike, particularly the second of those two.
Mm-hmm.
And he's built a reputation of being the guy that will always blame the bike and the team. Specifically, more the bike than the actual people, but the bike equivalents to the team as well. You can't blame the bike without blaming the team, in my opinion.
To some extent, the bike is the people. Yeah.
Right. And the mechanics that help you set that thing up and help test it and help design it. Like it's going to not just the bike, but the factory. Right. So I think that was part of the reason Yamaha didn't take him on as, and keep Justin Cooper around another year. And we're also more willing to take on Cooper Webb is they were like, look, you haven't figured it out. We haven't figured it out for you in regards to making you happy here and getting you to your, the top of your game over the last 2 years consistently, because he has shown when he's at the top of the game, he can win. He can be a podium guy, but he ain't done it. He ain't done it consistently. And I don't know when his last race win was, but I know he's got some podiums. But look, it just comes down to this. He wasn't treating the team the best way he could have and being, as positive as he should have been from a lot of people's expectations. And Yamaha was unable to give him a bike he was comfortable on. And even in his more specialty of the two parts of the series between in motocross where you're outdoors and Supercross where you're indoors, he's a motocross guy. He's a 450 champion in motocross. He'll tell you something he doesn't know which he likes better, but he's got a championship in one and not in the other. So he's more of a motocross specialist. And he was still 35 seconds off the pace compared to Chase and Jet throughout the whole motocross season. Didn't have nothing for him. Nothing.
Yeah, he was finishing, third and fourth sometimes, and it felt like he was finishing 10th.
Yeah, because the field was that depleted, right? Like we had Jason Anderson for a cup of tea. We had Justin Barcia for a cup of tea. We had Cooper Webb for 2 or 3 races in motocross. Tomac's gone. Stu's gone. Roxon was off riding in God knows where in regards to World Supercross. Jet went 22-0, but there was a lot of key players out of the picture. Or if they weren't out of the picture, they definitely weren't riding to their full potential, like a Jason Anderson or even a Justin Barcia, who, coming back from that injury late in that season, it took him a couple races to even get relevant. So I think Jet will have a tougher time than a lot of people may have outlooked on him to have for this upcoming season because of the recency bias. Like it just looked like he turned into the guy, no questions asked. No one's going to challenge him because the only guy that could take it to him was Chase. And then Roxon occasionally. So
let's go ahead and get into what this next season might look like as far as our top 10 guys.
Yeah, well, I forgot to get to this thing called the point with Dylan Ferrandis. Okay. I went off into I got in my Never Land again. But with Ferrandis, the reports I am hearing is that supposedly the guys over at Firepower Honda are able to get him comfortable. And that's something he says he hasn't had the last couple of years with Yamaha, particularly the last year. So he's saying he's happy. He's saying he feels better than ever. But freaking everybody does on the test track. Everyone says they're flying at the test track, and then half those guys after Anaheim 1 blame the bike, saying, "Oh, I didn't have it set up right," yada yada yada. I don't know what to think of Dylan Ferrandis. He could be a guy that gets a podium at Anaheim 1. He could be a guy that gets freaking 15th. I have no idea. He is another huge wild card. I definitely don't think he's anywhere in the top 5 of the standings by the end of the season. But I think he can show some flashes for sure. So with that, we can go ahead and transition from that because that's all I have to say. There's very limited information on him.
All right, who's your number 1 guy for next season? You want to start at the bottom? You want to go 10 to 1?
Let's go 10 to 1. Let's go 10 to 1.
Okay, I like 10 to 1. All right, you want to go first?
I'll give you the honors.
Okay. You want me to go the full way or just do one at a time?
I tell you what, let's go ahead and do the full way, and then we can break it down by each. So this is, for those that just need the clarification, this is going to be our prediction for the top 10 in the standings at the end of the Supercross season. So, Karsten, go ahead and let her rip.
At number 10, I have Hunter Lawrence.
Okay.
Okay. Number 9, Jason Anderson.
Okay.
Number 8, Christian Craig. Things are about to get controversial.
Okay.
Number 7, Justin Barsha.
Okay.
Number 6, Chase Sexton.
Whoa.
Number 5, Ken Roxon.
Okay.
4, Cooper Webb.
Okay.
3, Jet Lawrence.
Oh, wow. At 3. Okay. So then you've got somebody up here who's going to surprise me in the top 2.
Might. You're going to like one of them.
No way.
Number 2, Malcolm Stewart. And number 1.
Don't do that to me.
Eli Tomac.
Man, you're getting me too hyped, dude.
Listen, this is a bit of a shot in the dark here. I feel like so many of these guys are, I don't want to say up in the air, but like we just don't know. Like we got guys coming off of injury, we got guys switching teams, we got guys
on new bikes, on old
bikes. Yeah, like
you've got rookies.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
I'd say the most controversial, I'd say honestly, your most controversial is Chase Sexton at 6, but your second most, and it's not far off, is El Hombre down in 9th, or was it 8th, or what was
9th.
It? Yeah, that's worse than he was last year, I think, right? Yeah, that's way worse than he was last year. Last year he was 6th.
Yeah. Well, we got some new competition coming in.
Now, granted, last year Justin Hill finished 8th, so there is that.
There's that. Yeah, Eli Tomac ended up getting hurt. Cooper Webb got hurt. Malcolm Stewart got hurt.
Marvin Musquin, Dylan Ferrandis.
There were no Lawrence brothers.
I was at the race with the guys at Houston where Dylan Ferrandis knocked himself out, and that's not talked about. That may have cost Aaron Plessinger a win, because leading up to that, Aaron Plessinger was behind Eli Tomac at the start of that race and walked him down, and was about to make the move going into that 180-degree bull turn before the whoops at Houston. And that's right when Dylan Ferrandis had a crash where he knocked himself out cold, and it got red flagged right at that moment. And then for whatever reason, it wasn't clicking for Eli in the main event at that point. And then when we did the staggered restart, he just took off and dusted everybody. Like Chase Sexton caught him, but then Eli just went beast mode and held him off. And I don't know. He doesn't even know where it came from. He doesn't know, or either that or wouldn't reveal he was struggling with beforehand versus after. But apparently all Eli Tomac needed to win was for Dylan Ferrandis to take one for the team, knock himself unconscious, red flag the race, and give him a second shot. I don't know. But Ferrandis basically was a non-factor last season as well. I mean, a lot of guys were. So that's how you end up with like Justin Hill, basically a privateer, was pretty much a privateer at 8th, which is wild. So yeah, that's a fair. Considering that, then I think it's more that basically kind of puts him more on par with where he was last season than getting worse. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. All right, well, let's hear what yours is. I'll tell you
Okay,
why it's wrong.
so look, the beauty of
I'm
this
just
is
kidding.
the beauty of this is we'll both be dramatically wrong. Like
I think if we could each get like 2 right, by the end of the season, we got 2 that are in the correct spot, that would be impressive.
if we each combined get like one or two like positions perfectly called, like if I get somebody like in fourth or fifth that is
Yeah.
completely correct, and you get somebody in like third that's correct, like that will be amazing. But
Yeah.
if we combine get 5 guys in this top 10 that are at least in the
Miracle.
top 10, miracle, because that's how
Yeah.
this sport
Yeah.
works. But anywho, okay, I'll go from 10 up. 10th, I have Christian Craig.
Okay.
Number 9, I got Justin Barsha. In
Okay.
8th, I've got AP, Aaron Plessinger.
All right.
7th, I have Cooper Webb. And then 6th, I have
Okay.
El Hombre, Jason Anderson.
Okay.
And then this is where I almost feel like less of a fan to you, but I have Malcolm Stewart at 5th.
5th.
I have him at 5th for the
Unbelievable.
overall, but I do have him getting the race win. So, because keep in mind, he is coming back from literally tearing every ligament in his knee. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if he just as easily comes out and wins Anaheim 1 as he maybe comes out, gets the top 10 in Anaheim 1 in the first 3 races, and then starts putting some consistent, more 2022 Malcolm Stewart like finishes in the back 2/3 of the season. But just because,
Okay.
and gets some podiums, gets a race win, you know, and does really well. But when you have the next 4 guys in front of you that I'm about to list, you've got to be, in order to compete with the 4 guys I'm about to name off, you're going to have to be completely 100% and comfortable with your bike from the get-go, in my
Yeah.
opinion. So, with that being said, in 4th, I have Ken Roxon.
Okay.
In 3rd, I have, this is a shocker, in 3rd, I have Jet Lawrence.
I have Jet
In,
Lawrence in
se-
3rd as well.
in 2nd, I have Tomac, and in 1st, I have Sexton.
Okay.
I think that
I
last one is the most controversial part, but it's also just as easily explainable.
He's the defending champ.
Well, not just that, like this is only like I don't know when the last time the defending champ has switched teams. There's a crazy stat that I saw. I can't remember where I saw it from. He's like the first defending champ to switch teams to like at least 10 years, right?
Wow,
Usually when
that's
someone
interesting.
switches, yeah, and that just speaks to how hard this last year, really last 2 years were for him. For him and Ken Roxon on that Honda for 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So if what I'm hearing so far from him about the stability of the bike is true, the speed will come. It'll get there eventually. The question is, can he stay on 2 wheels for the whole season? And can he not just survive through the whoops? Can he, within a quick amount of time, get back to being the fastest guy on them? With the exception of, it rotating between him, Jet Lawrence, or Eli Tomac within a tenth of a second, right? Like
Yeah.
he needs to be at that top percentage of whoop speed. And that if that's the question with the KTM, that's what the KTM, the Husqvarna, the Gas has sucked at for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
That's why Cooper Webb has only won 2 races in the last 2 years since they introduced that new frame and new bike. So that's what it's going to come down to. Is you have to keep in mind he tested the bike that Cooper Webb hated for the last 2 years and said, I want that, compared to the Honda he was on in this time of October last year. That's because that's what he's like one of the first riders in a long time to admit he rode the bike before he signed the contract, which is a big deal for media in this sport. He wanted that bike, and that was before he had any of the huge crash issues he had in the Supercross Championship, of which he won, but still left with a bad taste in his mouth. And then before going toe-to-toe with a rookie in 450 motocross and the playoff and losing and getting a increased reputation for just having all the talent in the world and crashing out, and that he's the problem. So, that was before all of that. You have to take that into account. So he wants the bike that Webb left for. That was the reason he left for it. And I think whether he wins a championship or not is dependent on whether he doesn't get that bike and gets something better. So it's a wild card, dude. But I think if he's somewhere within 80% of the possibility of every night keeping it on two wheels and being the fastest guy, he's the only guy that can say so far that when Jet's been on a 450 and has given it everything he's got, Jet walked away after a race, granted of which Chase crashed at, but Jet went, I gave it all I had nothing for him. That was his to win. No one else can say that. Tomac maybe if he was available, but he can't. So that's where I'm coming from.
I think your only other controversial one, I would say, is how low you put Cooper Webb. Where did you have him? Like 6, 7?
7th.
7, yeah. I think that's pretty low for Cooper.
It is. I only say that because I don't think Anderson, like I think Anderson has a bounce back season, but with the given field, Anderson, if you have 3 or 4 more guys healthy last season, like let's look at who basically was out of the picture. Malcolm Stewart gone, right? He scored I think a handful of points from an 11th place finish and a 13th place finish in the first 2 rounds, and then dipped from losing his knee completely. Marvin Musquin out of the picture. I think he looks like he scored 11 points. So it looks like he got 11th at the first round and then dipped, practice crash, whatever it was. Who else is in here that we need to take into account? Heck, I mean, you've got Kyle Chisholm and Colt Nichols only being just about 100 points off from how much points he scored, which you would think there'd be a bigger gap there. Christian Craig's in the picture. I think he gets a little bit better. Anywho, there's just more. Dylan Ferrandis. That's the other name I was truly looking for. You tell me yes or no. If Dylan Ferrandis, Marvin Musquin, and Malcolm Stewart are all healthy for the whole season, as long as Anderson was in it, do they finish in front of Jason Anderson last season? Yes or no, with how bad he was riding? Because the guy behind Jason Anderson is Aaron Plessinger, and then it's Justin Hill. There's no one else. So if those 3 are in the picture, Musquin, Ferrandis, and Stu, with how bad Anderson had of a time last season, do you think that he finishes behind all 3 of those? Because I think they do. So that means, in my opinion, if he has a bounce back year for him, is unfortunately finishing in the exact same spot he was last year, but with a deeper field. So therefore, if you take 2 of these guys off of here with the almost inevitable Supercross season-ending injuries, halfway, early way through, or right at the season end, that puts him in the top 4.
That's true. You're not totally off on that, I don't think. So okay, I can see it.
But like I said, if those 3 guys are in the picture, do you feel like he finishes below them and finishes in 9th, or does he stay where he is and finishes 6th?
I think he can stay where he's at.
Ahead of Malcolm Stewart, who was leading Anaheim 1 and won a heat race, and
not Malcolm Stewart,
and Ferrandis, who had all kinds of speed but just couldn't control it.
I think he's still ahead of Ferrandis, and I think he's ahead of AP.
Musquin,
but not Malcolm. Yeah, ahead of Musquin too. Yeah.
So then you have him finishing 7th last year.
Who?
Instead of 6th, Anderson.
Jason. Yeah.
Okay, and that's fair. Because it is a little bit of a toss-up, but I just personally felt like he was riding so unconfident last year and was not comfortable at all. And honestly, just did not look like himself to the point where it looked like sometimes he was just gassed at the end of races. And sometimes if you're uncomfortable and having to really fight the bike, it takes more effort to deal with that and to stay on 2 wheels. So that's why it looks like, oh, well, they didn't have a good offseason. They're not physically fit. Their fitness isn't good. Well, no, maybe they're just having to wrestle a bike for 20 straight minutes instead of flow with it. Who knows? But yeah, I think a bounce back year for him with the field, never going to happen. But with the guys we have on this list all staying healthy, a bounce back year is 6. He can get the exact same result, but beat out the guys that are listed below him. I mean, that's got him beating Cooper Webb, who he was, let's see here, 3 spots behind last season. It's got him beating Justin Barsha, who he lost to last year by a spot. Lost to him by almost over 20 points. And it's got him beating Christian Craig, who desperately needs a comeback year and was projected to possibly beat him in the standings last year. He was a guy that could be anywhere between a top 5 guy or at least a top 10 guy. Didn't get either of them because of how, injuries, but also just how rough of a season he was having. So it's a toss-up, dude. I mean, any one of these guys on any of our top 10s, to some respect, could win a race.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say more than half of them could be in the championship picture. And we're like, look, I didn't call it, but I'm not surprised in the slightest.
Yeah.
Like, would you be surprised if Anderson turns into 2022 Anderson and is taking the fight to Sexton, Tomac, and Webb and Jet Lawrence? Like, I wouldn't.
Literally any combination of these guys in the top 5 wouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some combinations I might be surprised at, but any of them could wind up having a great season and be a top 5 guy. I mean, they all have the potential.
Some just have to do more first than others.
Yeah.
And that's a funny comment to make when you're looking at Jet Lawrence, because everything for this rookie season of his is a first in regards to Supercross, but winning races at the 450 level is not uncommon to him at this point. It's become an expectation. Yeah. But for someone like Malcolm Stewart, who is regarded as like, dude, that guy's so fast, he's got the speed. For him to be in that picture would mean he wins his first race. He's competing in his first title fight. He learns and consistently executes on maintaining a championship lead in regards to just not even being at the front, but just, staying in that top 3 of the standings, or at least within striking distance. It's a lot of firsts for someone like him, who I think is absolutely capable of doing that, so long as he comes back 100% healthy. He has the speed he's always had, but combines it with that consistency he had in 2022, and takes it to just that extra 1% he needs to get over the hump, And I really think that he had that race winning potential last season. And then, for Ken Roczen, it's a couple of not first, but just, it's been a while for him he's riding a bike with a Kickstarter on it and won Indianapolis last year. Yeah. But it's a matter of, can he get back into that form where he's staying in a championship mathematically in the top 4, top 3 within a race worth amount of points consistently for a whole season. I don't see him doing that. That's the only reason to have him 4th, because I think he'll win races. He could be your third most winning. Like, he could have the third most amount of race wins by the end of the season, but just has those nights where he is more sitting in 5th or 6th, and build that up over a whole season. The other guys get a race wins distance of points on them.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that, with Roczen. So, talking about first, let's talk about A1.
Well, wait, I sorry. The last thing I just realized, I didn't put Hunter Lawrence in my top 10, and you did.
I did, and I didn't put AP in my top 10, which I feel a little un-American about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, you may get evicted from Texas as a Southern native for doing that. He's not even from Texas. He's just from a specific part of Ohio that is like known for being like it's almost like an island of cowboys, where like, if you dropped like a Southern dude accustomed to like raising cattle and being an actual cowboy, you blindfolded him, sent him on a plane to where he lives in Ohio, and just said, hey, you're back in Bama, you're back in Texas, you're back in Georgia, Mississippi, he would buy it until it snows.
Yeah.
But he would buy
and
it.
Then you'd be like, where the hell am I at right now?
Exactly.
I went really far south. Like Australia south. Then I picked Hunter Lawrence.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
this is the thing, dude.
AP's a guy that like, he had that before. He finished 2nd in Anaheim 1 in 2022. Got his first podium. Mm-hmm. Crazy. Everyone was going absolutely crazy. Everyone still kind of knew it was kind of probably going to be a one-off for a while he developed. He's gotten a couple of, I think 2 or 3 podiums in the last year or so. He's shown flashes of speed, but he's had one night where no one could touch him until the ground touched him, or more like he touched the ground, and more than touched, more like kissed it multiple times, ate the dirt a little bit. as one would say. And his bike was absolutely trashed and smoking. So, if it weren't for half a lap, like he would have a night where he could point to and be like, no one could touch me on that night.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. Because he just randomly found that kind of speed to where the fastest guy in the whole freaking sport can't touch you. And
Which,
had nothing but clear track.
Yeah, to an extent, he can still say that. It's just he got a bad rut and caught the dirt. So
drug a foot peg when you didn't expect it to. Same thing happened to Chase Sexton at, I think, Indianapolis. That was one of his crashes, going over a very similar little, almost like a braking bump, but kind of in like a mini tabletop. Drug a foot peg on it and ate it. Same thing.
Yeah.
I don't. You never know what to think of that, but the only problem with that, he can have that mentality of he has the speed, right? Malcolm Stewart's had the speed for many years, but just hasn't put it all together with the one race yet to get that number one overall. He's gotten second. He's got 4 podiums over the last 2 seasons that he's raced the whole season in 2021 and 2022. Racked up a lot of points in those seasons too. Done everything there is except, well, other than winning a championship, except for just getting that first race win. But he's shown more than AP has in regards to being race win capable. So that's why I have Malcolm over AP by a pretty big margin. And I think if any of those two get a race win, it's gonna be Malcolm Stewart before AP, in my opinion.
I would agree with that as well. Yeah, 100%.
And I'm freaking praying it happens for the sake of the sport, because imagine that moment when really either one of these two guys, but especially Malcolm.
Yeah,
like
it'll be incredible.
They're both loved ridiculously by the fans, and you and I would both go crazy. But I would just love to see it so that I could hear what James Stewart has to say. Imagine if James Stewart is calling the race now that he's in the broadcasting booth. Imagine if he's calling the race where his brother gets his first win.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
And imagine if it's like Daytona, where Malcolm has shown all kinds of flashes of greatness and known to be like, hey, he could be like 10th in the standings right now, but Malcolm Stewart's a guy that could be your outside winner tonight. Kind of like what Justin Braden was doing from time to time, where he's like almost a half privateer rider, comes out and wins Daytona because he's that good at Daytona.
Yeah.
Tomac level good. It's weird. We're getting too much on the hypothetical here, but that's look, we just spent almost 2 hours previewing this, right? All to say, we don't know. We think we don't know, and we're going to be wrong by a massive margin. I predict. So so Anaheim won top 3 to close this show out. You know what? I want to hear. I want to hear what you have first. Once again, let's just keep it going that direction.
All right, I'm going to go bottom to top again.
Okay. Yep.
Eli.
Patient. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Eli. Okay.
Jet.
Okay.
Malcolm.
Dude, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this.
Okay.
I picked the opposite.
No.
I've got it. Got it right here.
Oh my gosh.
Malcolm third, Jet second, Tomac first.
Wow. That is interesting.
And I'm going off of, in Anaheim 1, a lot of times you could have an outside person like a Barsha come in and win the dadgum thing, right? Or I think Roxon in 2022 may have won Anaheim 1. I can't remember.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he did. I believe so.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anaheim 1 2022. Make sure I'm fact checking myself here. Let's see. Ken Roxon. Yep. Okay. So I'm not crazy. A lot of times it can just be the guy who has the least amount of changes on his bike at Anaheim 1 and is most comfortable that can win, right? And it could be an outside guy. Obviously, at that time, Ken Roxon was still being talked about as a guy that should be and could be in play for the championship at that moment.
Yeah.
Had a lot of health issues, had a lot of questions in regards to where he mentally was at with the sport, but still okay, he's so talented, should be there, should be a contender. So that's where I was going at in regards to my whole, who's going to be on the box is, Malcolm is the guy who will have the speed. It'll be, can he keep it on two wheels for the whole race? And is he truly coming back 100% healthy? I mean, if he's reportedly dusting AP and Craig, and I mean, RJ's on a 250, but RJ, if he's dusting them where they can't keep up with him, I would assume he's at least 90% there. So it's a matter of, can he keep it on two wheels? And when if and when he gets into a race winning position or a podium position in his first race back, can he keep the racecraft together? Can he put it all together for 20 minutes plus two? That's the question. And then Jet, he could be a guy that I honestly predict over the course of the season. The reason I have him number 3 instead of number 1 or number 2 on my top 10 list is I feel like he's going to be like a 2006 James Stewart, to where he could win the most amount of races, but he could also have a DNF or two that cost him the championship.
He could get
and that's kind of what we saw in 2006. Yeah. And I wouldn't even say in his head, just, it's just whenever he has a mistake, it's costly because he's going balls to the wall, and he doesn't have that VRM, that vet rider mentality of like what Tomac had, to where, look, Tomac had one unforced error last season, and it was in the second round where he had a crash, or it might have been the third round, I think, where he had that one crash, just took it a little bit too hard over a triple or whatever it was, went a little bit off, hit the hay bales, got back up, still finished in the top 10, I believe. And then after that, nothing. The only thing between him and that championship in regards to unforced errors was just a couple of nights where he had that vet rider mentality, knew he was a little bit off, something wasn't feeling right, finished 5th, and then turns around and gets first overall next race, and then kept doing that until he tore an Achilles, and should have pointed out that night at Colorado. So, with Jet, I think Chase and Tomac are kind of going to be that Chad Reed and Ricky Carmichael kind of role, where Jet may, be that James Stewart role, where he wins more races than them, but his lows hurt more than their lows. And that's saying something, because Chase Sexton is in this pack, and he's known as being the more inconsistent one compared to Jet over this last year. And, last year, when we were having these conversations about the 3-way title fight between Cooper Webb, Eli Tomac, and Chase Sexton, I was referring to Chase Sexton as the James Stewart, because everyone last year was talking about this 3-way title fight is so similar to 2006. And once again, we have the same thing, but with one difference. You got Cooper Webb out of it in the talks for the top 3, and you've got Jet Lawrence inserted. So the roles switch. Chase Sexton is your guy that is the Chad Reed, the guy that's like, well, he's the guy that's been challenging the guy who's won it, the most recently, which would have been Ricky Carmichael. In this case, it's Tomac. And so he's the one that's expected to take it to him. But here comes this newcomer. In 2006, it was James Stewart in his rookie year at the Premier Division, that is so talented. It's generational. He's coming in with the expectation of changing the sport, in which, obviously there's arguments that James, whether it be his own little mistakes here and there, not little, but his own mistakes here and there in races, or problems with the Yamaha, from leaving Kawasaki going to the Yamaha, which he struggled out later in his career with that Yamaha in particular. It's undoubted that he changed the sport. And, he was a generational athlete. And I think Jet will be the exact same way. The question is he a guy that puts 2 championships together and then wins that outdoor, which he already did. He's got that checked, and changes the sport from how much he raises the standard and consistently for so long is a threat to win it all and does win it all. Or does he put together 7 or 10? Having that kind of threat enter for its first time in Supercross,
that would be
the highest of the 3 championships. That is why Jet Lawrence is even is that James Stewart role, comparing this to 2006. And this is even more like, without any gate drops or anything, just looking at it from the preview side of things. this is even more shaping up to look like 2006, who people regard as the best Supercross season ever, because it was a 3-way title fight down to the last race. It's shaping up to look more like 2006 than 2006 did. So I'm so excited. That's all I have to say.
I am as well. I think it's gonna be a good season. I think we're gonna have a great time.
I look, all I want is to watch Malcolm Stewart race for all 17 races. I know it's a tall task. Take Malcolm Stewart out of it. For anyone's favorite rider, it's a tall task to just be there all 17 rounds. But by God, I was robbed of getting to watch him after a great 22 season, where I was like, look, he's got the speed. Last season, he put together the consistency. You put them together, you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich that means title threat. And more importantly, in regards for his career, just checking that race win box. And I was like, it's going to happen. Malcolm was saying it's going to happen. Malcolm's parents were saying it's going to happen. His brother, 2-time Supercross champion at the 450 level, and one of the only 3 people to have a perfect season outdoors in motocross, James Stewart, said he was going to get a race win. His trainers were going to say he was saying he was going to get a race win. His teammates were saying he was going to get a race win. Matter of fact, RJ kind of jinxed him at Snapdragon Stadium at round 2 in Oakland when Malcolm passed 6 guys, won the heat race, and what was honestly one of the most awesome rides to watch in a heat race that season. It was almost like I was watching a main event. I was on the edge of my seat, and then RJ won. I think he may have won that night, and then said in the camera in his podium interview, like, I'm gonna go watch Mookie go get this win, and right in the camera. And I was like, no, and then first lap crash, washes it out again on the whoops, and I was like, oh Lord. So, and that was the last we saw of him, unfortunately. So I feel like every big Malcolm Stewart fan feels robbed, and I think he does too. I think he's even on the record saying he felt robbed, and I think he's definitely under everyone's radar right now in regards to being in play for race wins, for podiums, top 5, being a top 5 machine. I think he's one of those 3 at the minimum.
Yeah.
Who knows? He could be a guy that sits 8th to 12th in the standings, but finally checks the box for the race win. Who knows? I don't care. I just want to see him race all 17 races. It's basically the equivalent of being a Charles Leclerc fan in F1, or maybe Ferrari in general, because you're like, we know we have what it takes to win. We just need to see it.
Just got to put it together.
And you almost get religious about it. You want it to happen so bad.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I'm at. It's unhealthy. It's unhealthy. But I know I'm not the only one.
But that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we've had to have covered at least half of what we should have. No, I'm kidding. This was as deep as a dive as we've ever done on the motorsports side of this thing. And that's as good of a preview for this weekend as you're going to get. So tune in this Saturday. I think it starts at 6 or 7. I think it starts at 7. Anaheim won this weekend, baby. And we'll be back the following week to give our post-race reaction and preview the round 2. And man, dude, I mean, all I've got to say is I'm so freaking excited. And it almost feels like I've been out of this, like, even with me converting into a giant Chase Sexton fan, by force with Malcolm being hurt, I still feel like the sport has been missing something with all the injuries we had last season. I'm sure as a lot of people have every season. So I'm just so excited. There's nothing like that pre-Anaheim 1 feeling, seeing everybody back healthy, and everyone's saying they're flying at the test track. Everyone's good. Everyone's looking great. Everyone, well, with the exception of Cooper Webb, he never looks great before races. You just have to put him next to somebody, and he just starts going crazy. Like, I don't know what it is. He's the only exception. Yeah. Everyone else looks great. And, dude, can't wait. Cannot wait.
I'm stoked. It's going to be a great season. Shaping up to be a good one for sure. Yeah.
Yep. We will be covering it the whole season. So make sure to tune in for it. And it's crazy to also think we're like 2.5 months away from F1 being back too. And it's January 2nd.
Golly.
Like, wild.
Yeah. Sneaking up.
Yep. So we'll cover that when it gets closer to, and that's when it's going to get hectic to cover both of them at the same time. But we'll do our best. And thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see y'all very soon. Bye-bye.
Later.